Okay, welcome to the live stream for March 14th. Yes, March 14th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So welcome. Got a few people hopping on tonight. Cole, Camilla, Leslie, Nikki, Linda, welcome. How is everybody doing? J Cat, it's my life. Noah, Arthur, hello. Or I should say, hola. I've been practicing my Spanish, and Arthur has so generously volunteered to help. Duolingo, best app ever. I just am in love with that app. Free Spirit, Karen, Stephanie. Shara says, hi, I've got some good news. Well, do tell. Oh, I know, right? Karen says, yes, it's so hard to get used to daylight savings time again. Yes. Oh, you're right. Linda says happy pie day. It's 3:14. I had pie today. I totally forgot that it was pie day and I have not had pie. I will have to correct that situation tomorrow. I love pie. Dandelion says, hola, I just finished 45 minutes on Duolingo. Good for you. They really did a great job with creating that app. I have to say, every time I'm on there, I'm just so impressed with how fun they make learning a foreign language. It's just such a different experience when it's like a game instead of, like seventh grade Spanish class, which for me was so incredibly traumatic and awful. So Camilla says, I just went on my first date in the past year and a half yesterday. It went well, but I'm taking it slow. Good for you. That's awesome. And that's a good attitude to have of, we're just going to take things slow and see, because, it's just about valuing yourself, valuing your time, valuing your energy, and valuing your emotions, and realizing that, everybody kind of looks good the first, at least the first 30 days. And it takes time to get to know a person. So I wanted to talk. Oh, interesting. Janine says, hi, Dana. How long has the chat been going? I didn't get a notification. It just started. So 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's a good reminder. Let me take a moment. YouTube does this weird thing where they will periodically unsubscribe people from channels, and they will just unnotify them. So even if you're subscribed to a channel, make sure that little bell icon near the subscribe button is also clicked. So if it's not clicked, then you're not going to get notifications. And even if you clicked it before, YouTube, I don't know, they get kind of jinky when they do updates and stuff. So what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to talk about karma. So this was a topic that we touched on. We probably touch on this quite often, actually, but it was brought up last week. And I had told the person, I said, give me some time to really kind of chew on this and gather my thoughts, because this is a really big topic. So I figured let's have that talk about karma, because I know a lot of people, I was there too, tend to really get caught up in this. And it's this feeling of, I want them to suffer. I want that universal justice, right? I want what goes around to come back around to them. And it's not right and it's not fair that they've left me and my children, our lives are just destroyed, and they've moved on. They've gone on to another family, and they seemingly have no consequences. And it's like they somehow just exist outside the laws of karma. And it can be, and oh man, I so get that. When I was going through everything with Jack, I had never been, I think, violated in such a way. And I had never experienced anger that, like the anger that I felt in that situation at that time. And I'd also never found myself wanting vengeance, I guess, as much as I did in that situation. And so anyways, when that whole everything fell apart, the truth came to light, and I realized, oh my God, I've gotten tangled up with an emotional and financial con artist. Um, she was shortly, like a few days after I moved out, and my whole life was just up in shambles. It was like somebody kicking out the chair underneath me. It was so incredibly just beyond awful. Well, shortly after that, we ended up having this huge forest fire where we lived. And I found out later on that the house that we lived in, which I absolutely loved, was one of the houses that was lost in the fire. And part of me at the time was like, okay, yeah, at least he can't live there. Right. I took some sort of satisfaction in at least he can't have this amazing house on this amazing land. Well, then I found out later on that um, I think what ended up happening, I just came across some pictures online. I wasn't even looking. And it looks like he has since rebuilt that house on that land. The only way that I can think that that was even possible was that the owner of the property ended up um, selling it to him for dirt cheap because the land, everything was burned, right? So, which then sent me back to square one of like, this is even more unfair that he's got this amazing property. He was able to rebuild that whole house and, probably had the insurance money to do it. And it's not right. And it's not fair. So I get that feeling of wanting vengeance. But I guess the point of that story is that when we see events, we only see them as a snapshot. And so, like I was saying, there was this, you know, this forest fire, right? So in that snapshot in time, I was like, okay, good. This is karma. He's not going to be able to live there. The house is going to burn down. At least I felt some sort of vengeance in that. But then that was short lived because then I found out, oh no, he was able to get this land for probably dirt cheap or free and rebuild. And his house is even better than it was before on this amazing land that we lived on. So, kind of what I took away from that was when we look at events in kind of this snapshot way, I think Eckhart Tolle sums this up the best in the book, The Power of Now. He talks about, events are a thread in a tapestry that we will never see complete. And when we have this limited understanding of good and bad, and our emotional state is dependent upon this limited understanding of good and bad, then it kind of puts us on this emotional roller coaster. So, for example, there's a story, this maybe better illustrates the point. There's a story, I don't know if it's a Buddhist story or what it is, but it's the farmer and his son. And the story goes that there's this old farmer, and poor old farmer, he lives on this land with his son, and they have one horse, a plow horse. And one day they're out plowing the fields, and the horse runs away. And all the neighbors say, oh my goodness, this is so terrible. This is so unfortunate. Your only plow horse ran away. And the farmer says, well, perhaps. Well, then 3 days later, that horse that ran away comes back, and it comes back with 4 other horses. And the neighbors all say, oh my goodness, your luck is so amazing. This is so fantastic. And now you will be the richest man in all of town. You have 4 horses. And the farmer says, well, perhaps. And so a few days later, the son is out there and he's trying to get the plow on one of the new horses. And the horse ends up kicking him and breaking the son's leg. And the villagers all say, oh my goodness, this is so terrible. This is your only son and you are so old, and it is plowing season, and who is going to help you? And this is so awful. And the farmer says, well, perhaps. And then 2 weeks later, the villages end up breaking out into war, and all of the young men are rounded up and they're forced to go fight. They're recruited to go fight in the army for this war, all but his son, who has this broken leg. And all the villagers say, oh my goodness, you are so fortunate. Your son had this broken leg and now he didn't go fight in the war, and you're so fortunate. And the farmer says, perhaps. And the story goes, and, and the whole point of the story is just showing that there are these highs and lows in life. But if we attach our emotions to them and to our understanding of, I think, kind of good and bad, and let our emotions attach to that, then it's a very fragile way to live. And also, so in Buddhism, so this was a big thing for me, really trying to come to grips with kind of what to do with that pain, and letting go of wanting to see vengeance, wanting to see the people that had hurt me, I wanted to see their whole lives destroyed as much as mine was. And that's a very understandable feeling. But what I learned in all of that was that, first off, I might never see that. And I probably won't see that because I'm no contact, right? And I've blocked them across the board. So I will never see that, even if it does happen. Even if it doesn't happen, I will never know. But the realization I had from that, so in Buddhism, there's this whole concept of suffering and what causes suffering. And in large part, human suffering is caused by clinging and craving. And I would add a third to that, which would be comparison. So clinging and craving, clinging to what was, ideas of what should be, the past, in many different ways, shape, and forms, with our youth, with the relationship we used to have, the relationship we thought we had, clinging to ideas of what's right and wrong, clinging to ideas of what's fair, clinging to these ideas of the way that things should be. Craving brings suffering because we're craving for things to be something other than they are, where we're always living. We're living in the future. Oh, I'll be happy when justice is served. I'll be happy when I lose 20 pounds. I'll be happy when I get that degree, or when I get that promotion, or when I have a baby, or when my kids grow up and they're out of the house. And either way, that clinging or that craving, we're not living in the present moment. And so contentment is the opposite of suffering. And to be content in the moment really means to be fully present, I think, kind of in the moment. And I think with that, so I talked yesterday with that live stream with Angie, we were talking about the concept of fairness, which tends to kind of go hand in hand with the concept of karma, right? We want fairness. They did me wrong. I want somebody to do them wrong, or maybe not even wrong. Like I want to see justice served, right? I want things to be fair. A big realization for me in all of this was the realization that life is not fair. And that's a really hard pill to swallow, and I get it. But life is about growth. And so what can we do? What can we do with that? And I think to embrace that growth mindset, it's about focusing on, I think, what you do have control over, which is using these events that come downstream in our life, some of which we have control over, some of which we don't. Sometimes things just happen, right? Children get cancer, people get kidnapped, bad things can happen to good people. Sometimes things just happen. And we have to take what happens. I think one of the best ways to kind of transmute all of that pain and anger and that feeling of this is not fair is to transmute that pain into using it for our highest and greatest good, and using it for the highest and greatest good of others. So here's an example of that. If you guys remember the old TV show, America's Most Wanted, the host, John Walsh, he was a guy who, his young son, I forget how old his son was, like 6 years old maybe, was kidnapped and brutally murdered. And they didn't have closure on that for years, decades, I think. I think they actually caught the killer, confessed in 2008. So it was like 20 something years. They just didn't know what had really happened to their son and who did it and why. But he channeled a lot of that pain and that anger into doing what he could. And so he took an active part in that show, America's Most Wanted, in order to catch these kinds of people, these dangerous, destructive, deadly people, and to get them off the streets. And that was his outlet of using what had happened to him and his son and his family for his highest and greatest good, and for the highest and greatest good of others. So I think it's embracing that growth mindset of what can you, in big ways and small ways, of making what happened to you work for you as much as humanly possible. And I've talked about this before of in small ways, making the declaration that this is not going to ruin your life. That's a huge declaration to make, even if you don't know, like, I don't know how to not let this ruin my life. Just making that declaration of, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. And then you get busy on building up a life that you love. And so, back when I was going through all of this, it was very much so, like, in small ways. I mean, I would clean out my car. I would take my dog for a walk. I would paint my toenails. I would clean out my junk drawer. I would clean out my fridge. I was juicing. I was, going to the gym. I was doing everything I possibly could to get that energy and that anger out in constructive ways, because that anger, it will destroy you otherwise, especially if you're letting that anger stew and you're waiting for vengeance. So it's important that we try to cultivate that growth mindset as much as we possibly can. It's not easy, because there are definitely times, and it's a normal human emotion, to want to see somebody who's done you wrong, to want to see them suffer, to want fairness. And so moving past that comes with making different decisions, more empowering decisions in small and big ways every single day. So I hope that that's such a big conversation, and it's such a touchy conversation. I don't know. I hope that what I said helps somewhat. Bonnie says, yes, use the pain to help yourself and others. Nikki says, I love that. Life is about growth. Yes. And, because oftentimes we can't control necessarily what happens to us, but we can control our perception of what happens to us. That's another thing. Let's talk about that for a little bit. So in these types of situations, right, you get tangled up with an abusive person. You're manipulated. You don't know what's going on, right? And then you kind of come out on the other side of this, and it's very common for people to internalize that and to be like, there must be something wrong with me. They told me something was wrong with me, that I was somehow stupid or bad or ugly, and that I deserved this. And, maybe you had a parent who was awful to you, and then you ended up marrying a person that was awful to you. And then you start kind of waking up to all of this, and you're like, I don't know who has the problem. Is it me or is it them? Did I deserve it, or did I cause it, or did I play a part in this? And what is all of this? And kind of shifting that mindset from internalizing it and accepting that abusive point of view, to realize, to not accepting it, to being like, you know what, I don't own that. I might not be perfect, but that doesn't mean that they needed to treat me that way. So there's no excuse for abuse. And so kind of changing your perception of events is a big part in that it's okay for a person to get upset or to be frustrated or even to be angry, but there's no reason for a person to get loud. There's no reason for a person to be cruel, and there's definitely no reason for a person to become violent, either verbally or physically. Like, there's no need for that. That's not you, that's them. That's their behavior is a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you. So changing your perception of the events is also a big shift that can go a long ways towards helping healing. So, okay. Yeah. My Thai says, I never understood anxiety attacks until I had one after my breakup. Yes. That's another thing is when we go through events like this, we oftentimes become incredibly a lot more compassionate towards other people, the suffering of others, because we do understand so much of this so much better. We understand being emotionally devastated, having anxiety attacks, having depression, um, maybe having chronic either emotional pain or physical pain, starting from ground zero. Like, it really kind of connects people in a way. Trauma connects people in a way that I don't know if anything else really can. So it can really bring forth a lot of compassion and bonding in people. Daniel says, I do not want karma. I do not want justice. I just want to move on. How do I do that more quickly? I think it's really in making that decision that you're not going to let this ruin your life and that you get clear. What does a good life look like to you? Because every person, it's going to look like something very different, right? So getting clear, what does a good life look like to you? And then start taking those actions on a daily regular basis to start bringing that into fruition. And here's the thing too, with healing, with moving forward, it's not an event, it's a process. So there is no point in time where it's not such a binary thing. Like there's no point in time where you're like, and I'm healed, right? Like, and I've moved on. It happens with small decisions daily, and that can start now. It can start now, and it's difficult at first. Like doing anything new is incredibly difficult, and doing something when you don't want to do it is even more difficult. So making these decisions to be like, okay, like the mental training that goes into it really is intense. I think of it sort of like, when a person goes through, let's say, a horrific car accident, right? And then they go through physical therapy for maybe like a year after that accident. They don't want to go. It's painful. They're gritting their teeth. Their physical therapist is making them walk down the hallway. They're in so much pain, but they know, like, I have to do this or my muscles are going to atrophy. Like, I have to do this. It's very much the same way mentally and emotionally. When something traumatic happens to us, doing things that you might not want to do, such as, going out, showering every day, or forcing yourself to put down all of this pain and going and allowing yourself to go do something fun. Even though you don't feel like having fun, even though you don't want to, even though you're so angry, you don't even know how to, but just being like, okay, I'm just going to go to a comedy club, or I'm going to go bowling, or I'm going to go sign up for some meetups, because this is part of like my like mental therapy. Just like your physical therapy, walking down the hallway when you don't want to and you've got pins sticking out of your leg and you're in pain and you're crying through it. There's a lot to be said for doing the same kind of thing mentally and emotionally, because what happens with trauma is when something happens to a person, your brain, it's like a flash bulb goes off, and there's all of these chemicals that go through you, this adrenaline, all of this stuff, and your brain will just kind of latch on to that one event, and it'll need to fully process that event until it can move forward. The problem with that is there is no closure with an abusive person. And so we have to find our own closure. And so it's kind of this balancing act between, I think, understanding that getting the closure that you wish you could get from them, and understanding that you're going to feel this wide range of emotions, and it's okay to feel that wide range of emotions. That's part of healing as well. But then also realizing that doing those things, like allowing yourself, okay, I'm going to go spend 10 minutes and I'm going to go watch some comedy videos on YouTube, or I'm going to spend 10 minutes and listen to a guided imagery video on YouTube. Something different than this, something different than watching channels on emotional abuse, right? Like, watching Shark Tank or watching, um, I don't know, old Sherlock Holmes videos or something totally different just to give your brain a break. It can really, really help because it can remind you that we don't need to wait until we're fully healed to start living. And in fact, what helps us to heal faster is to start living now. And then over time, there will come a point where you're like, wow, you know what? Like, I just realized I haven't thought about that person in like 5 months. That's amazing to me. Or, I just came across a person, maybe a new coworker who has the same name as my ex, and it didn't cause anxiety in me. Or I just saw the same type of car as theirs on the highway and didn't faze me one bit. So you're healing in all of these little, big and little ways every single moment of every single day. And so to really take that time to get out there, start living again in both big ways and small ways. I'm a big fan of, going to meetup groups, even if you don't want to, signing up to do things that you think you'll enjoy, making an effort to get back out into life as much as you possibly can. I'm not a fan of people dating. I would encourage you to build up, make sure that you've got that you're building up a life that you love with hobbies and friends. Get that support system, like that solid ground of a support system in place before you start dating again. So, I hope that helps. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. That's a really great point. Stainless says, I'm doing an anger class and talking with my therapist about it, and it helped me to see that the anger just covers up the pain. Grieving helped me tremendously. Yes, there's a saying out there that anger is the bodyguard to hurt. And there's a lot of truth to that. And it's normal and understandable to be hurt, So yeah, I think grieving the loss of what we had, grieving the loss of who we thought they were, grieving the loss of the fantasy of what could be. It's a lot. There's just a lot with this, and it does take time. It does take time. But, at the end of the day, we are in control of our emotions, even if it really doesn't feel like it. So kind of getting, like I had mentioned before, I used to do things, I would get so overwhelmed with, I really struggle with depression anyhow, but I definitely did back then. And living alone, kind of in the middle of the nowhere. Living in a house, a rental property that had been trying to sell since my divorce, but then the market turned. This house, Jack and I were in the middle of redoing it. It was destroyed. I mean, the floor was torn up. It was just awful. And so, and then I found out everything that he was up to. And so I had to move into this house, and it was so incredibly depressing and overwhelming. It was just awful. And there were many days where I was like, okay, Dana, you need to go take a shower. Like you need to leave the house. Like even if you just go to the gas station and just talk to another person for 5 minutes, that's what you need to go do. And it was very difficult. I mean, there were times where I had to be like a drill sergeant and say, okay, Dana, let's get out of bed. Like right foot, left foot, march your body into the shower. Let's go. I felt like I didn't have, if I stayed in that pain, if I stayed kind of wallowing in that depression, it was going to completely sink me. It was a very, very scary low place. Okay, let me scroll down. Yes, Bonnie absolutely says it's like grieving a death that hasn't even happened yet. Yes. And Jennifer says, I'm the opposite. I haven't gotten to anger yet, and I've been in therapy for 4 years, 5 years altogether, including my first therapist. Everybody processes emotions differently. Some people, instead of feeling angry, they'd feel numb. The brain is a funny thing, and we all kind of have, I think, these default responses, maybe depending upon like how you've been conditioned to handle anger in the past. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with anger, with their own anger and with the anger of other people. And because they don't like it, maybe their previous pattern was to kind of always be this perpetual peacekeeper, where they would walk on eggshells, or they just got used to lying to themselves. Oh, no, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. We're all fine. I can handle it. And we just kind of had that stiff upper lip, right? And you just kind of chug through and don't deal with that anger. For me, I can relate to that as well. My normal default tends to just be numbness or depression. And with that event with Jack, I had never experienced that amount of anger before. So that was a very new emotion for me, because I don't know if I'd really ever, like, nothing comes to mind, never really allowed myself to feel anger before. And I think there was a wide variety of reasons for that. But yeah, it's interesting when you start realizing, wow, there's all these other emotions inside of me that maybe I've never experienced this level before. And it can take a while to kind of work through them. I think when people aren't comfortable with anger, their own or others, it can be scary. It can be like, I don't know if I uncork this bottle, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if I can get that cork back in the bottle. So it's almost safer for me just to stay numb or depressed than it is for me to actually get angry, because I don't know how to handle that, you know? Nikki says, I'm stuck on being angry that my ex took advantage of me, the smirking in my face while he was destroying even his own son's life. The power and control made him so happy. Yeah, their behavior is just disgusting. And I think trying to squeeze out as much as you possibly can from that situation. So, for example, and making it work for your highest and greatest good and for your son's highest and greatest good. So, for example, realizing, okay, you know what? I am never going to have another person in our life that treats us like that. Okay, that's one lesson that we can get it from that. Another lesson is that we both deserve better. That's ridiculous. And you just keep you keep pulling, these nuggets out of all of that mud that were his actions, and it's a hard process. It really is. And it's understandable and it's normal to be angry about stuff like that. I am a big fan of, kind of the best revenge is having an amazing life. And so when you start when those feelings of anger really bubble up, to try to transmute them, and you're like, oh man, it was so sick the way he, took advantage of us and hurt his son, and being like, you know what, I'm not going to give him that power. I'm not going to give that power. I'm not going to give him or that situation any more power. And then when those feelings of rage surface, to go to your son and you give him a big hug and you just say, you know what, kiddo, I love you so much and you matter. And you try to use all of that anger and that animosity you have, and you transmute it into something that's loving and good. And you use it to build that that good life for yourself and that good life for your son. And you just keep doing it. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Lauren is saying that she had a friend break up with her for talking too much about the abuse that she was experiencing at the time. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that's very normal, because if a person hasn't gone through it, or even if they have gone through it, but if they went through it a long time ago and they're no longer in that space, this kind of stuff is just too intense. And it's difficult. It's so difficult to move forward after these situations, because when a person has been wronged in such a way and they need closure and they need compassion, they just need to feel validated, is such a big part of it. And so they oftentimes do that by talking. I think all of us have gone through that, and sort of like getting that poison out of your belly. And finding a good therapist, sometimes letting a therapist or even friends or family just know of like, I just need to talk about this. I just need somebody to listen. I don't want advice. I don't need advice. I don't want advice. I don't want to feel better. Like I just want to talk about this, because I think for other people, they just don't know what to do about all of this. And there's, when we're fresh out, there's definitely that rehashing where we're continually revisiting all of these events in order, and I think in large part, to try to make sense of them all. So we might, but to other people, they're like, oh my God, get over it already. But for us, it's like, it's our brain's way of trying to figure it out, where we're like, you know what? That time that he said he was working late, I bet he was really at Susan's house, right? Or we have all these aha moments the more information that starts coming to light. And we tend to just need to keep circling around and around and around and around until we can kind of get that closure that we need, that we're never going to get from them. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Yes, I agree. Green Eyes says, I do think we become obsessed in the beginning, just learning about narcissism. Oh, there it goes. It's a tough pill to swallow that evil really exists. Oh, it's like, I mean, it's like being T-boned by a unicorn. I mean, it's just, or not even, maybe that's like a dragon. I mean, it's just so outrageous. Like, what just happened? I cannot believe that this awful accident happened. And I can't believe that it was by something so crazy. And what happened? It just really rocks our very understanding of other people and of relationships, and so much. Yeah, it's intense. I mean, it, it's just amazing. Normal, decent people can't even begin to comprehend like the level of deceit and wickedness that people like this can have when a person has no moral compass and they're so incredibly selfish and hurtful, and there's no empathy or remorse. I mean, it's just hard to even comprehend that another person could be like that. And then just all of the manipulation and lies. It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. So, okay. Let me scroll up here. Oh, Noah, that's a great point. And I'd forgotten that I'd mentioned that. That is something I still want to do. He says, in one of your older videos, you talked about starting a series on messed up ideas about love that people have. Can you say what some of those ideas are? Thank you. Okay, great question. So some of those ideas, and I think I turned a lot of those ideas into my second book, which is called Out of the Fog, which you can find on Amazon. But messed up idea that love destroys a person. That, if a person doesn't feel this level of like unhinged, crazed neediness, that it's not love. And the reality is true love, sincere love does not feel like that. it's a deep level of appreciation for another person. It shouldn't drive another person to want to, murder somebody or kill themselves. Like that level of crazedness is not love. That's generally comes from trauma bonding or messed up ideas about love, that love conquers all. I think kind of like the Beauty and the Beast effect, that, the love of a good woman or even of a man, the love of a good person can somehow turn this raging lunatic into this ideal person, and that our love can magically save another person. And it doesn't work like that. Some other really twisted ideas that love is all about that love is unconditional, and that love is that basically that love kind of keeps track of no wrongs, and that we need to continually forgive. A lot of this is kind of little bits and pieces of scripture too, that's twisted and turned into justifying and allowing abuse. We need to forgive those like, God forgives us, kind of a thing. And then people twist that into somehow meaning, okay, this person who lies and cheats and steals and abuses, that we need to continually allow them into our lives and give multiple chances. If they say they're sorry, then we need to forgive them. And that's stupid, right? Like that leads us down. That's foolish. That leads us down this path of to hell is where it leads us, because they're not really sorry. And they're preying on our hope and maybe on our faith and everything else to string us along, and while they're dragging us through hell, and they're not sorry. So, the only true apology is changed behavior. Anything other than that is just talk. Let's see, other faulty ideas about love. Well, I think, like I said, that we can somehow, that love is all we need, right? That true love conquers all. And the reality is there's a difference between going through the highs and lows of life together, like a good economy, a bad economy, sickness, health, job loss, job change, children, family stuff, the highs and lows of life, versus being put through so much by somebody else. Abuse, addiction, adultery, lying, manipulation. There is no value to hold on while somebody else is dragging you through hell. But so often society thinks, oh, that's so fantastic, they stayed together. I remember the second narcissist I had in my life, one of the things that he did is he had said, I really want you to see the movie of the Johnny Cash story. And I watched that movie and I was absolutely horrified. And I told him, I said, this is not love. Like this, their whole the quote unquote love story was back in like the 50s. And she'd already been divorced, I think 3 times. And she didn't want the stigma of being divorced. And there were all these highs and lows with him. And he had a drug problem and an alcohol problem. And he was a chronic cheater and obviously liar and manipulator. And she kept trying to make that relationship work and kept trying to get him sober and kept trying to get him clean and kept trying to keep him faithful. And I remember watching that and telling the guy I was with, I'm like, this is not love. Like, if you love a person, you don't treat them like that. And I said, that will never be me. It was just weird. And so anyways, it was kind of the weird foreshadowing too, because, then down the road, it turns out that was exactly him, that there were drugs and alcohol and women and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, no, I'm not going to fight for us when, it's a whole saying, like, I'm not even going to go to war for us if you haven't even laced your boots. Like, you're not even trying. You're the one who's doing all this stuff. So this idea of unconditional love, I think is a bunch of nonsense. And for me, when I'm in a relationship with somebody, it is very conditional. You need to treat me with dignity and respect. There needs to be that sense of mutual trust and support. And if that's not there, then there's nothing there and I'm gone. So those would just be some that come to mind. Yes. Bonnie says, and there's no rules for narcissists, yet they hold you accountable for everything. They are very vindictive. They hold you accountable for everything. They hold grudges forever. Yeah, it's all about them, right? If you point out, like, I don't even know. There's no accountability for their own actions. It's always everybody else's fault. Their actions are no big deal. They should get unlimited second or 20-second chances. You should forgive them. It's such an immature outlook on life. But the reality is, if you did to them what they have done to you, they would have left you a long time ago. So it's very much a one-way street. There's a saying, with a narcissist, they basically insist that we make them our everything while they'll make us their nothing. And that's so true. It's such a one-way street. And right there, if you're in a one-way dynamic with anybody, it's not worth being in, because it's not a relationship. It's a one-way street. If you're continually giving, they're continually taking. That's not a relationship. So, okay. And Deborah says, you can forgive somebody, but make sure you move on. Yeah. And I think there's different understandings of forgiveness, and this is a conversation that, Lucy feels very passionately about. And I agree with her 100%. I think she's just spot on about it. She talks about, the Bible is very clear about forgiveness, and it talks about, kind of this ground rules for forgiving another person. They have to have that accountability, and they have to be able to own their behavior and right their wrongs. When the Bible talks about forgiveness, it's very specific about when it's appropriate to forgive. When I talk, but I think most people don't talk about forgiveness like that. It's just this kind of like fluffy term, like, what, you just need to forgive. And that can feel incredibly, understandably so, re-victimizing to somebody. It's like, they did this heinous crime against me and you want me to forgive them. But I think there's a difference. There's a difference between forgiveness and allowance. So kind of my take on forgiveness, like I would say, like part 2 of that forgiveness is when somebody has done us wrong, and let's say, which is oftentimes the case in our types of situations, where there is no sincere apology. They don't correct their behavior, right? If we get an apology, it's just words, and then they're back to doing whatever they're doing, or they get better at hiding it. So we may never get that apology, that sincerity that's needed, because they don't have empathy or remorse. So we may not ever get that part of it. But I think another important part of quote unquote forgiveness, and I don't even like to use the word forgiveness because I think it is so twisted and misused. And I've seen it happen time and time again, where people then they misunderstand the concept of forgiveness, or it gets twisted to where they confuse that with allowance, or giving another person a second or 20-second chance. And oftentimes it's, so let me just talk about this for a little bit. It's important for us. So when I talk about forgiveness, I oftentimes talk about it in terms of releasing anger. And it's an important part of it. So I may never get a sincere apology. I will never get a sincere apology for what they did. I know this. So, but then then you're stuck. I'm stuck with carrying all this anger around, which it's like acid. It just eats away at you on the insides. And so a big part of healing when people say, oh, you need to forgive for yourself, they're oftentimes talking about you need to work to release that anger so it doesn't destroy your life. I always make it a point to be very clear with other people because I don't like it when people tell me that I need to forgive. In general, it's like, no, you just stay in your lane. Like, don't be telling me what I need to be doing with my life, especially when it comes to stuff like that, because I just become very reactive very quickly. I think most people do. But I will say, if by forgive you mean work to release anger, then yes, that is something that I'm working on. And that's something that takes time. However, for a lot of people, they struggle with this because it's that anger, it's righteous anger, first and foremost. And that anger is oftentimes something that's keeping them from going back. And so it can be really scary to be like, okay, well, I need to release this anger, but damn, I don't want to forget what they did. I don't want that anger is keeping me from going back. And so how do I work towards releasing it and then still keep myself safe at the same time? And that's a challenge. So, one of the things I always recommend to people is writing out. So if you're finding yourself kind of caught there, you're like, okay, I need to work towards releasing anger, but I don't want to ever forget what they did to me because I don't want to ever go back to them or anybody even like them, is to write down that list of kind of for when you miss him or her, and write down all of the reasons that you need to stay gone, everything that they've ever done. So, and so if those feelings of nostalgia kick up, or if they do reopen contact and you're tempted to try to quote unquote be friends with them or be nice or allow them back in your life, then you can go to your list and it'll remind you. So that way you can release the anger, but not lose the lesson, if that makes sense. Because that can be a really difficult kind of balancing line, tightrope to walk. And let's talk about that real quick too. Friends versus a person being friendly. It's so very common. On a lot of these concepts, I do talk in a lot more depth in my second book, the Out of the Fog book, of the differences. So the first book that I wrote is called Start Here. And it's frequently asked questions. It really, truly, it's a book where people, if you're new to all of this and you're like, okay, I'm hearing these words like flying monkeys and projection and love bombing and hoovering, and I don't know what all that means, but you're trying to get caught up to speed with everything. Please check out that book. If you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber on Amazon, then those books are free. They're part of your Kindle Unlimited membership. But anyways, so the first book is all about commonly used like words and definitions and concepts. And I have a lot of examples in there. There's frequently asked questions. It's just kind of the book I needed is what it was. It's the book I needed to get me caught up to speed when I found out what was going on. The second book compares and contrasts frequently confused concepts. So the second book is more about comparing and contrasting the difference between like love and love bombing, or being friendly versus a person being a friend, commitment versus codependency, these kinds of things that just get really twisted that can cause a person to get back into an abusive relationship or to stay in that confusion. So let's talk really quick about being, an ex wanting to be a friend, because it's a very common scenario where after a certain amount of time, maybe a person still has a lot of hurt. Oh, they've moved on. They're now with this new person. They seem so happy. They seem to not care. They act like it's no big deal. They act like I'm just being petty, or that I need to get over it, that I should be happy that they're so happy and that they want to be my friend. And not only do they want to be my friend, but they really hope that we can all hang out together. And they want to tell me all about their new girlfriend or boyfriend. And they want my advice on things because they really value me as a friend. I will tell you that's a load of nonsense. And it's just more of the abuse. It's more of the crazy making, and it's all about power and control. So getting clear on this concept of what is friendship. Okay. So if you can get clear on these different concepts, it's a lot easier to not get caught up in all of this because they can seem so convincing and it's all just so confusing, right? So friendship is a state of mutual trust and support. Mutual, two-way street, trust and support. There's that sense of safety with that person, especially emotional safety. You can open up to them, you can be yourself around them. There's that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. You guys probably have a lot of things in common. It's a place, friendship, a healthy friendship is a place where you go to get nourished. It's just kind of this really fantastic give and take. It's a two-way street. When a person is just being friendly, but there's none of that other stuff there is no mutual trust and support, or it's the opposite. They've shown you that they lie, they cheat, they steal, they manipulate, they use, they abuse, they exploit. That person is not a friend. That is not what a friend does. That's actually the opposite. That's an enemy. So just because the enemy is smiling at you and they're acting friendly doesn't make them a friend. So it's okay. You're not being petty. Don't get caught up in all the manipulation of, oh, we need to be friends for the kids or all of this stuff. You need to see the situation clearly for what it is. You can still be pleasant. You can be polite, but you can also be brief. And you don't need to have a personal relationship with a person who has hurt you. It's okay. It's okay to not want to be friends with everybody who claims to want to be friends with you, especially if they're saying, oh, no, I'm your friend. And they continue to twist the knife and you don't feel emotionally safe around them. Like that's not a friend. Right? Amy says, yeah, my ex-narc treated me like crap when we were together. So why would I want a friend like that? Yeah, absolutely. But I think so many people that do get caught up in that, they're holding on, and I get it because I've been there. Like they're holding on to those good times, right? Of like, man, this person, like they have a really great sense of humor, or we had very similar interests, that we were both really into camping. And I miss having somebody to do stuff like that with. I miss having certain conversations. There's going to be things, because most people are not 100% rotten 100% of the time. But if we know, we're like, man, but you know what though? This person is crazy making. This person is hurtful to me. Even if it's only that way, like 1% of the time, it's so toxic. Having 1% of poison in the water that you're drinking is still going to make you sick. So, and this is where it goes back to building up that life that you love. Because it's hard if we have nobody else in our life, if we've really made this other person our whole life and we don't have a lot of other friends or hobbies or anything really outside of them, it's a lot harder to let go of somebody if they're kind of all you have. So if you can get out there, I'm, like I said, big fan of meetup groups, or if you're however you find the need are able to increase your social circle, whether it's at church, whether it's volunteering, whether it's with meetup.com, whether it's, whatever, then getting out and doing new things and meeting new people, it's a lot easier to let go of those poisonous situations when we have other things that can kind of take the place of that. Because if that's all we have in our life and we let go, then there's this huge void. And it's really, that the feeling can be profound. So it really does help to get out there, stay busy, start doing things that you love, start meeting new people, even if you don't feel like it. Jay Boogie says, how do you deal with the idea that somebody else can make them happy and do for them what you couldn't? I think you realize that that doesn't work that way. That nobody's going to make them, it's not, their behavior is a reflection of them. It's not of us, and also realizing what you see is a very edited version of reality. You're seeing what they want you to see, for starters, or you're seeing what they post on social media. And oftentimes what you're seeing is the idealized stage for the next person, because it's like the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. So if they have an abusive personality, because it's a mindset, it has nothing to do with you. You got tangled up in it. It's like a school bully, right? To the kid that's getting bullied, it feels really freaking personal because it's personalized bullying, but that kid's a bully. And if that kid that's getting bullied were to move schools, that bully's just going to pick another kid. Like, it's not about the kid that's getting bullied. It's about the bully. It's the same thing with an abusive person. But just like a kid in school, they're going to bully each kid differently for different reasons. And an abusive person, there is so much like deep-seated stuff within them that everybody goes through a different idealized stage. Everybody goes through a different devalue stage. So I guess just realizing that nobody can make anybody else happy. Nobody can make somebody else abuse them. It just doesn't work that way. So, it's who they are, and two, when somebody shows you that they lack a moral compass, believe that, like they bring that to the table. I'm trying to think of people like, do you think, I don't know, I'm trying to think people that have cheated or lied or manipulated. Do you think Monica Lewinsky thinks to herself, oh boy, Bill Clinton, what is it about Hillary Clinton? What makes her so much better than me? How come he stayed married to her? How come, what's so wrong with me? I hope she doesn't think that. Right? So just because this person, this lying, cheating, manipulative person's with either their old partner or they're with somebody new, doesn't mean that they've changed. They just change targets and tactics. Or, I don't know. It's it's not, we're on the receiving end of this. Like, we got tangled up with it, but it's not us, it's them. Okay, let me. Yeah, Karen says, and remember to that, narcissists, their personality disorder carries to all areas of life. Yeah, how a person, with especially personality stuff, it's like with anybody, how we tend to do one thing is how we do multiple things. If this is how that person handles like stress and frustration, and if they have this complete inability to be vulnerable and to be monogamous and honest, like they're like that in multiple ways. A person, like if they don't have a moral compass in certain areas, they just don't have it kind of across the board. Yeah, Missouri Cowboy says, yeah, 21-year-old intern seduced by the most powerful man on the planet. Yep. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. I agree. She says, Monica Lewinsky has a really great TED talk on how humiliation can be more deeply felt than happiness or anger. I would agree completely. Shame and embarrassment are some of the I think heaviest felt emotions and some of the hardest ones to overcome, and oftentimes drive a person to suicide, because it can just be so incredibly difficult to move past that. Especially, I look at her situation, she was so young and there was so much animosity and hate towards her, and talk about just destroying your reputation and your life, and all of that is just, I can't even imagine. I cannot even imagine. Not saying that not that she was like an innocent person in all of this, she should have never been doing what she was doing, but at the same time, I could see how somebody could get caught up in all of that. with a really powerful person, and being very charismatic, and her being young, and this huge imbalance of power, and on and on. I think it just goes to show it's really important for us to, doing the right thing is always the right thing. And no matter how great the promise, I could imagine it would feel really, you could feel really important and really special of, oh, this really successful, handsome person is interested in me, and feeling chosen and feeling just kind of there. I think I could see there being a huge mix of emotions there. So I'm sure there was a lot of manipulation at play. Yeah, Amy says, I used to look back at their pictures and cry. Why? They look so happy. And I was like, why not me? I had to flip to it and think, if she likes it, better her than me, because I knew what he was doing. Yes, I agree. And that was my same thing with both the two, Jack and Steve, in my life. I don't think for a second, there's no, I mean, like, especially with Jack, thankfully I was able to talk to his ex-wife, and she was like, oh, honey, run. Like, this guy is not at all who he claims to be. I knew then, I'm like, I got tangled up with a con artist. Like, this is not who I fell in love with, doesn't exist. And so for me, it was pretty easy to just be like, this guy is all smoke and mirrors, and he uses and exploits people. The level of deceit was just so beyond anything that I ever even could comprehend that one person would do to another person. It was just so unnecessary and just ridiculous and over the top that, like, no, I mean, I don't want to be, I need to have that mutual trust and support, and like like, he's not even remotely capable of that. He's a complete con artist, on every level. So, and then with Steve, talking to his wife, who turned out to be still his wife, not even his ex-wife, and then finding out, oh, this had been going on their whole marriage. It was just crystal clear. I'm like, no, this is just who he is. It wasn't me. It wasn't a one-time thing. Like, she's put up with it for 10 years. And I don't want that to be me. Like, I don't want to, I need that mutual trust and support. He's not that cute. Like, it's not, his behavior is outrageous. So yeah, he was handsome and he was charming and he was charismatic, but I'm not selling my, sanity for that. So it was one of those feelings of like, I can either just pull that Band-Aid off and start healing now, or I can just stay in denial about it and continue to have this destroy me. So it's hard. It's hard to deal with the reality of a person in a situation, but it's harder to try to keep denying it. And that's very true. Elizabeth says, yeah, and the person being abused usually helps to maintain the facade, posting happy pictures and forgetting the bad moments. Absolutely, especially on social media. People talk about this. This is such a common thing for people to kind of get stuck on. And I totally get it, but you've got to realize that what you're seeing, not even just with abusive people and their targets, but with people in general on the internet, especially Facebook and Instagram, you're seeing very scripted reality. You're seeing their highlight reel. You're seeing this perfect family, or them at a posing for, some sort of, birthday event or a vacation or whatever. Like, you don't see them first thing in the morning. You don't experience their children that are all snotty and sick and, having a total level 10 meltdown in the middle of Target. Like, nobody's posting that kind of stuff, right? On Facebook and Instagram. It's always, this scripted reality. And it's bizarre. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about suffering. It's why I added that third one to it, because comparison is such a big part of suffering. When we look at other people and we're like, oh, I wish my life was like that. I wish I had a husband like that. I wish my kids, like that. And I wish I had a house or a car or a job or hair or, you know what I mean? Or looked like that in a bathing suit or whatever it is. And when we can start comparing ourselves, especially when we're comparing ourselves to this unrealistic standard of what they want us to see, then man, talk about making yourself miserable. So, you know, I just don't believe everything that you see. Because yeah, lots of people could be like, okay, here, happy family photo, like hashtag best husband ever, right? Hashtag whatever. And then you don't know what happened 5 minutes before that, or you don't know that 10 minutes before that, he was texting his girlfriend or yelling at his kids, or, you don't see the full picture. And I'm not saying that everybody's like that online. Of course they're not, but there's a lot of people out there, that especially abusive people, that really post these scripted images online. It's just part of what they do. It's to convince themselves that they're not a bad person. So, okay. Let me scroll up here. I'm not sure if somebody's trying to get my attention. If you're trying to get my attention in the chat, if you could please maybe type in all caps. Yes, kitties are cute says it's a showmance. Yes, instead of a romance, it's a showmance. It's all for show. I've known there's like 3 different people that come to my mind that are man, showmance, queens and kings. It's ridiculous. Okay, let me scroll here. Also, too, people are talking about how they look on Facebook and being happy, and it's a load of garbage. And yeah, and remember, a lot of it too is it's for that idealization of the new person, which can be confusing because somebody's like, well, wait a minute, when they were with me, they didn't let me wear makeup, or we never left the house. They didn't want to go to Disney World with me, and now they're going to Disney World with this new person. And so therefore that confirms it was me. I was the problem, because look, now they're at Disney World and they're so happy, and this other person's getting this life that I wanted, and it's not right and it's not fair. And the reality is, what's going on is the idealized stage is different for everybody, just like the devalue stage is different for everybody. And when you see stuff like that, especially if it's exactly what you wanted to do, like go to Disney World or wear makeup or stuff like that, odds are that's part of the continued devalue stage for you. Because if they know that you're probably still looking at their account, they know what a win-win, right? They get to idealize this new person and they get to twist the knife with you. Oh, that's really going to get her. I'm taking the new targets, her and her kids to Disney World, and never did anything like that with my own kids. It's all part of it. It's sick. It's just sick, but that's what they oftentimes do. Deb says, do you think it's good to talk to his ex-wife? He's always hidden his past and people in his life, but I managed to find out who she is on Facebook, but wasn't sure how to approach her. I think it depends on whether or not doing so could potentially put you in harm's way. So here's how I approached Jack's ex. I found her on Facebook and I messaged her and I said, hi, you don't know me, but my name is Dana. And I think I said something like, I'm just trying to get some clarity or some answers. This is like, I feel like my whole world is blown apart and I'm so confused and I don't know what's going on. And I was just wondering to know if you could talk. And she was, thank goodness, she was probably curious as more what was really going on with her. She was probably curious, but she was like, yeah, we can talk. And then she called me that night. And then that was when even more stuff came out about just all of it was a lie. So it helped to give me the validation I needed, but I was also no contact and I was living in a different city. So it kind of gave me that added reassurance of it all. Yeah, Missouri Cowboy says the neurochemistry of the trauma bond causes the target victim to forget the abuse, causing trauma amnesia and remembering only the picture perfect snapshot. Yeah. And I think too, in part is there's just so much, like there's so much to even remember that it can be like taking a drink out of a fire hose, where it's just so much outrageousness that like, it's like the human brain can't even begin to comprehend all of it because there's so freaking much. And I remember I was cleaning out I had this like memory trunk of mine. And this was like, I had just started my YouTube channel. So it's probably about 3 years ago. And I was going through there, just kind of organizing photos. And it was all weird because I don't normally do that. I think it was just because I was kind of on this organization kick. Anyways, I was cleaning out this memory trunk, going through it. And I came across a book in there. And inside that book, there was a drawing that Jack had done stuck between some pages. I don't know if I put it in there or if he put it in there or like even how it got in there. But what was weird is I remember him doing that drawing. I'll have to see if I can find it. I'll have to see if I can find it. I have a picture of it, but I'll have to see if I can find the real one or the original. It was a picture of me reading a book. And in the corner, there was a picture of a giant snake that looked like it had swallowed a person. And in the shadow of the snake, there was a heart. And when I saw that picture, it was just, now granted, this was, 4+ years after I'd left that I found this, but it was so validating. It was such a mix of emotions because it was so validating to find something like that and be like, okay, I'm not crazy for thinking that he was trying to kill me or poison me, because here he is drawing a picture of a snake that looks like it had swallowed me. And who draws stuff like that? But also, then it made me kind of think like, if I put this picture in here, like, how did I forget that? Like, how did that not register as a big deal? And then that kind of sent my brain down this whole path of like, well, then what else don't I remember? Like, it was just very unnerving. So I don't know, kind of validating, but unnerving all at the same time. I think a lot of people, when they start remembering stuff, are like, how could I have forgotten something like that? But it's all part of it. Okay. Kiara says, hey, Dana, what are some good ways to preserve your energy as an intuitive empath? And how do I stop giving energy to others or picking up on other people's energy? That's a good question. I think by maybe tuning in to your own energy, kind of what nourishes you, what drains you. Like the more you can get in balance with that, the more sensitive you're going to become to when you're giving too much energy to somebody or some situation, as well as when that energy is being like kind of drained from you. Because once you're more in tune with like, man, this is really draining, then the next step is going to be then to start distancing yourself from that person or that situation by whatever means necessary. So like, or whatever that might mean to you. So for example, if you're like, oh my God, I just realized like my job is totally draining me. Like how did I not realize this before? Right? Like I've been here for 10 years and I never noticed it. But now you're more in tune with things, then realizing, okay, maybe it's time to start looking for another job, or maybe I need to cut back to part-time, or maybe I just need to start closing my office door more, or maybe I need to leave during lunch. Do you see what I'm saying? Like trying to figure out, okay, what makes this less draining for you. Or maybe I need to stop hanging out with certain coworkers, or maybe I need to start being more assertive in meetings, or just kind of whatever, like whatever that might look like to you. There's different things too, as far as like visualization exercises that you can do. So like if you have to be around certain people, let's say you have to go to court, or you're still dealing with a really toxic ex, so here's 3 different visualization exercises you can do. The first one would be to visualize a door. It could be in the middle of a room. So like mentally, you can just kind of draw an outline of a door. And at the top of that door, visualize like a silver, just beautiful, healing, cleansing, restorative waterfall. And imagine that as soon as you walk through that door and walk underneath that waterfall, that it's just going to cleanse off any of that negativity and that negative energy from you. So if you're in court, you can imagine either you can use the literal door that's in the courtroom and just kind of visualize that waterfall and then walk through it, or you can visualize that door in the middle of the courtroom and then take 2 steps and just walk through it. So that's one exercise. Another one would be kind of visualizing a bubble around you. So kind of same kind of thing, maybe a very like translucent, silver, healing, restorative, protective bubble. That's just kind of like everything that connects you to everything good and right in the world, just good energy is in that bubble. And that everything else is kind of going on around outside of the bubble. So you can still kind of be in it, but it's not coming in to your bubble. So that's another visualization exercise you can do. The third one has to do with like cord cutting. So let's say, for example, after a long day, or maybe, a long day at work or dealing with your ex or what have you, and you just feel like this, that you're still thinking about these people, you're still stewing on things, you're still kind of caught up in all of this, to visualize that connection, them draining that energy from you as these cords that are attached to you. So and you might want to even visualize them in different colors. They're sucking your energy. So whatever that might look like for you, that might look like cords of your kind of white or silver energy being drained from you, like kind of like a big umbilical cord that's coming off of you. Or maybe there's multiple cords. Maybe there's multiple people. So you can go through and visualize like detaching those cords. Maybe you literally cut them. Maybe you kind of detach them by just pulling them off, however you want to visualize it, and then send it back to them. Or you can take that cord, they're draining your energy, you can take it and then you can visualize sending it up to the divine, sending it back up to God. If you don't want to send it back to them, send it back up to everything that's right and good. So cutting cords is a big thing, and that really does help to just kind of releasing the energy, releasing the thoughts, taking back control of the energy and not letting it be drained from you. Jennifer says, so my father is also a narcissist, but my stepsister on my mom's side is also a huge narcissist. She used to be my best friend since I was 8, but she would take advantage of me from a young age. So now I've gone pretty much no contact with her, but she's still in the family. Is there a way to deal with her in person without having to confront her? I think as long as you see her behavior for what it is, and you realize, okay, like this person's not a friend, I can't trust them. You can still be pleasant and polite and brief, and then be gone. So just really spending limited amounts of time with that person. Just, keeping things very superficial. So yeah, you can still do it. I mean, pleasant, polite, professional, and then gone. Be gone. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Green Eye says, I'm doing hot yoga and I really like it. Yeah, hot yoga is awesome. I agree. It feels so good to just sweat everything out. And it can just be such a grounding, an awesome grounding feeling. Missouri Cowboys asks, hey, Dana, can you explain flashbacks and how to deal with them for new Chris and for all of us? Sure. Everybody experiences flashbacks in different ways and for different reasons. It just, and it can be really confusing. So I think when most people think of flashbacks, they think of, or PTSD in general, they think of like a war veteran. So you think of a war veteran having a flashback, like they hear a car backfire and they think back to like machine gun fire. And sometimes, depending on the type of trauma a person goes through, it can be very cause and effect like that, right? Like you hear a car backfire that sounds like a gun, you think about guns. But sometimes when it's more emotional trauma and it's not related to like a physical event like that, flashbacks can be really confusing. So it might be something like coming across a person who in some way, shape, or form reminds you of your ex. Let's say your ex was a cowboy and had a cowboy hat and had a truck, and his name was Rex, and he, I don't know, he was really, he loved apple pie and I don't know, macaroni and cheese, right? And so then, and he loved, I studied pickup truck, right? So then maybe down the road, a person's like, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel like my heart just is, I'm having all this anxiety. I saw a red pickup truck, but it's not, and they might not connect it, that the red pickup truck is a trigger, and that maybe country music is a trigger. People named Rex might be a trigger. Guys that are 6'4" like Rex was is a trigger. Country music is a trigger. Apple pie and macaroni and cheese is a trigger. So all of these things can trigger a flashback. And so we can tell if we're being triggered. Generally, we have a disproportionate emotional response to a situation. It's probably the easiest way to tell. So somebody serves you macaroni and cheese, and all of a sudden you're just in a bad mood. Some people might have more, like in the movies, flashbacks seem like literally like a flashback, right? Like with the war veteran scenario, they hear a car backfire and then boom, they're taken back to Vietnam, and it's night and there's gunfire and people are in foxholes and there's this whole scene that's playing out. I've never experienced something that's like that drawn out. Some people might, other people might not. Sometimes it can just be a feeling. Like just all of a sudden you feel really depressed, you feel really anxious, you break out into tears, you start screaming at somebody. You're having a disproportionate emotional response to what's going on. So that's a great way to tell if you're being triggered. And then the flashbacks can be where we emotionally flash back to different things. I'm trying to think of which book. Was it that I think it's that Complex PTSD book by Pete Walker. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think it's that book that I'm thinking of. It might be The Body Keeps the Score. Both of those books are good. So, if you're up for a read, I would check out both of them. But to kind of understanding emotional triggers and flashbacks. Because odds are there's always something there. We're having a really disproportionate emotional response to something. There's something there. Like you're not just crazy. Like there's something more going on there, but it's going on at a subconscious level. Elizabeth says, yeah, in my experience, I felt that so many men were overtly abusive that I wanted to believe he was the nice guy he was pretending to be, like he was one in a million. Yeah. And that's one of the most difficult kind, is that whole kind of proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. where we're like, wow, I really didn't see that coming. Like he was so incredibly charming, so charismatic and handsome. And I just felt like the center of his world and he treated me so well. That was one of the hardest things for me to make sense of and to heal from with Jack, because he wasn't overt. He was, I thought I had this amazing life and my world was just absolutely rocked when I found out all the deceit and the lies and the craziness and all of it. So yeah, I can totally relate. Okay, so let me scroll down here. Yeah. W. Russell says, yeah, having flashbacks. I think saying, I have flashbacks around alcohol and people who drink. Yeah. And that's common. It's interesting what the different ways that people can be triggered and the different responses that they might have to it. The brain is such an interesting thing. So, for example, like with 9/11, a lot of people were afraid to fly afterwards, which makes total sense, right? Planes crashed into the World Trade Center. It was a horrific event for all of us. I'm sure, obviously, especially more so for people than New York. So, but what might have been confusing for a lot of people is if they started experiencing anxiety with getting into an elevator or with driving to work or with sending their kids to school. And it was like, then you can feel like you're losing your mind. Like, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? Maybe they're like, this is, yeah, okay, 9/11 happened, but now all of a sudden I don't want to let my kids out of my sight. And I feel the need to say I love them like 27 times a day. And I can't function. So sometimes it's less direct, and that level of anxiety and confusion can be really crazy making and confusing for a person. I think in part two is how, when we talk about trauma, because that word sounds really major, right? So even now, how I'm talking about it, like 9/11 or some sort of like horrific abuse or things like that, most people tend to think of trauma in those terms. Like, well, but what about me? Like, maybe I went through this thing, or maybe, I wouldn't say it was really trauma, but this person was really a jerk, and or my boss was really a jerk and I just never really knew where I stood. But now all of a sudden, like, I feel like I just have trouble trusting people, and I feel really anxious and like I'm walking on eggshells and I can't function and I can't sleep. And the point is that trauma trauma is really anything that's traumatizing to a person. And it can be, and everybody experiences trauma differently. So, for example, one person might be in a car accident. You could have two people be in a car accident. One person is fine, the other person experiences PTSD with that. So, it's our brains, the way that they interpret what happens to us can be very, very different. And that can also be a very isolating experience. If you've been in a car accident, or both people get in a car accident, or both people develop cancer, one person ends up feeling incredibly traumatized and the other person is like, man, I've got a new lease on life. This is they're fine, but they're better than fine. Trauma, how we respond to these things, it's all very individual. Okay, let's see here. Postmodern says, I suppose being bullied or feeling trapped, like I don't have a choice in the matter, really triggers me. Yes, I would agree. Jennifer says, what are the different types of narcissists and the differences between them? Are there different ways of dealing with them, or do you deal with all of them the same? That's a great question. There's so all of these different subtypes of narcissists that you probably have heard, like even like covert, overt, cerebral, somatic, delusional, vulnerable, these kind of things. That's none of that's in the DSM. So that's more terminology. I don't really quite know who all came up with all of those kind of subcategories. I think they're fantastic as far as understanding, I don't know, maybe just having the kind of a subcategories, but it's basically with a narcissist or a sociopath or what have you, that level of power and control, that level of selfishness, it's gonna manifest in different ways. And so while everybody's still an individual, while they're all still individuals, right? So their behavior traits are still going to manifest in their own ways. Sometimes you can lump them into different categories. So like somatic narcissists are very kind of a body oriented, very sexual. That's the way that they get those self-esteem needs met. They tend to be chronic cheaters. They tend to be very charismatic. They tend to be very hypersexual. That's how they get their self-esteem needs met. So they tend to, like I said, be very body oriented. They tend to take a lot of selfies of their body. They work out all the time. It's just all about their body. They're just very sexual. And they don't necessarily all work out all the time, but it's very, sexuality is their weapon, basically. Cerebral narcissists are often incredibly intelligent. They might, most of the times, that's their focus. They may not be sexual at all. And they tend to use their intellect is their weapon. So they like might be just incredibly draining because, having an argument with them, having a conversation always ends up into an argument. It's always their way or the highway. They will just kind of browbeat a person into kind of intellectual submission. And it's just exhausting. Even if they have the most outrageous views on stuff, they are never wrong. And they tend to come across as very arrogant, very opinionated, very brash, just exhausting. Delusional narcissists tend to be the ones that I would say form cults. They're the one, they think they're chosen by God. They're incredibly grandiose. They, all kinds of just way far out crazy beliefs. Like I said, maybe they're chosen by God. They are God. They, are a prophet. They have this amazing insight into. These are the people that the convinced aliens talk to them, and that they're somehow the chosen one, and that everybody's going to fly on a ship, follow them, kind of a thing. So it's their grandiosity, I would say, is more of their weapon. But even with a lot of the delusional narcissists, I don't even know how much of that, like, they may very well believe their own delusions at some point. I mean, they're just really, they're sick. They're sick people. Anyways, I guess the point being is, with any type of manipulative person, the bottom line, while that kind of stuff can be interesting, it can be interesting to kind of sort out, okay, is this person more like overt or covert? Which overt is something that's more outright. That's overt narcissist is like the snake on the street. A covert narcissist is the snake in the grass. So anything covert is more hidden. So their grandiosity, their arrogance, their really unhealthy ego tends to be more hidden. Altruistic narcissist is another type, tend to be they could be seeming to be very like spiritual, very kind, very helpful, but it's all for, and I think even a lot of times those people too are kind of like right on the fringe of starting a cult. Like, it's just because the ego takes over. So while all of these terms can be really interesting and they can be helpful and they can be validating, I think at the end of the day, what's most important is to just realize problematic behavior when you see it, or when you feel it. Problematic behavior is more felt than, I think, seen. It's just that feeling, something's off. I don't like that, and getting in tune enough with yourself to know kind of what nourishes you and what drains you, and how to take corrective action, especially if something's draining you or that's just not working for you or that's problematic in any way, shape, or form. So I would spend more time focusing on getting in tune with yourself as much as possible. But I so get this, because I think a lot of people, when they're fairly new to this kind of stuff, it's understandable. Like I said, I was there too, where they're like, the narcissist or the sociopath was the problem. Like, I got tangled up with them. Like, there's, it feels like a hit and run accident. And in many ways it is. And hopefully you'll never encounter a person like this ever again in your life. But the thing is, these people are out there, and it's really important to learn, to kind of hone your instincts and tune into kind of where your boundaries with other people. And this stuff, it took me years. It took me like 7 years to really even begin to scratch the surface on all of this, because I just didn't see. I was racking my brain. I'm like, what could I have done differently? Like, what signs was I missing? And with Jack and Steve both, because they were very covert, they were charming, they were handsome, seemed like Prince Charming, like world's greatest guys. Everybody loved them. I loved them. I mean, it was just too good to be true. And I kept thinking, like, well, what did I miss? Like, it's not the kind of guy that I would normally, back when I was teaching classes at a domestic violence shelter, I was teaching the exact opposite signs. Jealous, controlling, verbally abusive, subtle put downs, possessive, these kinds of things. I didn't have any of that with them. And so that really threw me for a loop of like, well, then what am I missing? Because the first guy, I'm pretty sure, was planning on killing me. And it's just the level, like, things could have just gotten so bad without any of those normal warning signs there. And what I was able to go back to was those red flags, man. Like, my gut instincts were going wild with both of them. Like, but I kept glossing over it, thinking nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. Who am I to judge? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I really felt that I needed to have concrete proof before I got rid of them. I felt judgmental. I felt paranoid. I felt unreasonable, especially because everybody else around me was like, oh, Dana, they're so wonderful. Like, it is you. Like, it is just you. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Maybe you have fears of commitment. Maybe all kinds of stuff. But I learned so much from these events. And one of them was always trust your gut. And if it feels off, it's because it's off. And you really need to get so grounded in understanding how you feel that even if you're in a room full of people that disagree with you and they're like, no, this person seems like, really charming and wonderful. If you feel like there's something off, then you need to distance yourself. Because especially with those covert types, like the Bill Cosbys of the world, other people might not see it. But if you're sensing that something's off, you've got to be firm enough in your decisions to not care what anybody else thinks and to do what you need to do to get yourself out of that situation. And I will tell you, because it's so easy to go back and forth and wonder, maybe it is me. Like, well, what if it is me? And what if I do have commitment issues? And what if it is my PTSD and all of this? At the end of the day, if you make the commitment to yourself, or just even having the realization of any relationship that causes perpetual confusion like that, or mental anguish of any kind, it's not worth being in. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter. We don't need to figure out what their intentions are. If they are a narcissist, we don't need to wait for things to get bad. We don't need to wait for more concrete proof. Like, if perpetual confusion and mental anguish are present, no relationship is worth it. No job is worth it. No friendship is worth it. No, nothing is worth that. Like, nothing is worth your sanity. So just that alone, it means it's not going to work. So I hope that helps. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Yeah. Skywalker says, I saw a therapist that I couldn't afford who treated me like I had three heads when I tried to explain what was happening. I think that's more common than not. That was my experience too. And I went through a handful during all of that. I even went to one who worked at the agency, the domestic violence agency that I used to work for. And I didn't even identify that what had happened to me with Jack was psychological abuse. I had no idea what had happened because I didn't have anything really concrete. Like I knew that he had been lying to me from day one, that he'd been cheating on me from day one, that he'd been introducing me to all of these different people over a period of 2 years, pretending like they were friends or coworkers. And it was just like this weird, sick game. I didn't know why I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't know why I felt like I couldn't trust anybody and that I wanted to isolate. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. And that therapist had no idea. The same. Like I had three heads and was from Mars. And I spent years feeling really invalidated and crazy and like there was something wrong with me that I just couldn't move on past, this guy who just cheats on me. But it was so much more than that. And so much more than that. So yeah, it can take a little while to find a therapist. If you're trying to find a therapist, I think using the terms emotional abuse or psychological abuse. The term narcissistic abuse is not something that's commonly used. So yeah, emotional or psychological abuse would be the words that I would use with that. Okay, let me scroll up here. And there are tons of support groups online. I'm a big fan of people getting into support groups. Like I said, there's a lot out there. Join a handful on this topic. You can find my support group. I have one on my website, one on Facebook. Thrive After Abuse is the group. Make sure that if your privacy is an issue, make sure that you're posting in the group and not on the page. So the page is open. The group is not. The group is closed. So joining a handful of different support groups can be a really great way just to get that validation and that clarity that so many people, and I get it, that people need. And then, if you are seeing a therapist and you're like, okay, I am still getting, it still feels really good just to go in there and just to kind of unload on another person for an hour. Or if they're helping you in certain ways, but you're like, I just don't feel that I don't know if they really believe me, or I'm not sure. Like they just don't seem to get like large portions of it. If you're still getting something out of it, then, you can by all means still do what's working for you. But sometimes it can be a really good approach to have like a therapist and a support group. So just to keep that in mind. Okay, yeah, Kitties Are Cute says Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving is the book by Pete Walker. It pretty much covers everything you need to know about complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. That really was a great book. I need to go back and reread it because there's just so much in there. And Rachel says, wow, any intimate moment in a movie is a big trigger. I'm seeing someone, yet it still triggers me. And I think that's normal too. I avoided like romantic movies, romantic songs, especially because my situation, it was they were like Prince Charming. And so it was very much like a movie, very scripted, very over the top, very like fairy tale kind of stuff. And so I avoided like romantic comedies, that kind of stuff for years after that. And that's okay. Like if that's what you need to do to heal, then by all means, you just need to. During that time, I watched a lot of comedy. I watched a lot of documentaries because I knew that would be kind of safe ground So I watched a lot of like health documentaries. So it's just kind of knowing yourself and what you need and what nourishes you and what drains you. Colleen says, "Hey Dana, my ex was outwardly kind and charming the way that you describe yours, but lied and cheated. I wonder if I missed the abuse. Is there a way to recall abuse if it was not recognized at the time?" I think it tends to just, you'll have, if it did happen, you'll have moments where you start remembering things. So here's an example in my own life. So like with Jack, the only things that I really remember was just the tremendous amount of gaslighting, but I didn't recognize it as gaslighting at the time. So, and projection would be the two main things that I encountered. Towards the tail end of things there, he started going through my laundry and just accusing me of cheating, accusing me of trying to, but it wasn't, I mean, I've experienced gaslighting before that was so much more severe than that. It registered as odd, but I just thought it was his insecurities. He told me his ex-wife had cheated on him. And I just thought, I thought he was joking like half the time. But then there was that one day he began going through my laundry and I'm like, what are you doing? And he made some sort of crack about me cheating on him. I was like, what are you talking about? But I think in my mind, I just brushed it off of like, maybe he was joking. Maybe he was going through like the pockets of his laundry before I washed the clothes. Like it just didn't even compute because it was so not what I was doing, you know? And then after the fact, going back and then realizing, oh my God, he'd been introducing me to all of these people. Why? I don't know. As some weird like power and control play to like rub it in my face. Maybe it was the whole duper's delight to realize what he could get away with. I have no idea. But that takes its toll on your mind with remembering things and just the level of deceit. It was just, I don't know. I guess I don't try to even go back and like poke around and try to remember everything. I figure if it's important, it'll surface in time. But I'm, and I've been, like I said, I've been out for a while. So like for me, it's more, I just try to focus on like moving forward, you know? And I had mentioned this last time. I've mentioned this often because it was so significant for me. I was living with a coworker. So, you know, all of this happened. I found out, I'm like, oh my God, boom, my life, my world's completely turned 180. I ended up moving out of the house. I moved like an hour and a half away to this other city to live in this trashed rental property because obviously I'm not going to be living with him anymore. My job was an hour and a half away, each direction in good weather, like on a scary back mountain road. And so I would go to work on the weekends and I would stay with a coworker who was this woman from Ireland who was very no nonsense. And I would talk to her about Jack and, you know, it just rocked my world, you know. And she'd mentioned one night, she's like, you know, you basically just need to shut the door. She's like, Dana, you just shut the door and you just don't look back. Like, don't even open it, you know, in this kind of really thick Irish accent of hers. And that was what I needed to hear at the time because that's what I kept doing. I kept opening the door and I'd kind of go walk around back there and in my brain and examine things and kind of, you're picking up rocks and you're looking at them and then you'd put them back down again. And I was like, no, you know what? There's no benefit to this. Like just shut the door and start moving forward, start rebuilding your life. You know, I was never going to have all the answers because it was all a lie. So trying to sort out what was what and what was truth and what was lie and what did he really mean by this? Like all of that was just a huge exercise in futility that I was never going to know for certain. The only thing I knew for certain was everything was a lie. So I just kind of, I think, had to just make the jump of it was all a lie. It was all a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And then I just need to drive on. Like no point in sifting and sorting and trying to make sense out of the nonsensical. Kiara says, does anyone struggle with perfectionism and making mistakes? I'm often scared to start something new, something I'm not sure I'm good at yet, because I'm afraid to do it wrong and mess it up. Yes. So I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially if they had a perfectionist parent, or they had if they had a critical person in their life at any time. And it is amazing how it doesn't even take like years of being criticized or undermined or demeaned for a person to get so rattled by that. Here's an example. The gal, I forget her name, the gal that wrote the book, Romancing the Stone. If you remember, I'm aging myself, but if you remember that book, fantastic movie from the 80s. But she was in a writer's group when she was in college, and her college professor told her, he said, basically, you know what, you've got no talent. If I were you, I would quit writing. And she thought, well, he's a writing instructor. He's a professor. He teaches writing. He knows better than I do. He must be right. And so she didn't write for like 20 years after that. And that's so heartbreaking to me, So we all can come across these kinds of just jerk face people that are so power hungry, that have such a small, fragile ego, that need to go around crushing other people to make themselves feel better. They're everywhere, And I think kind of the lessons from that is that we need to develop stronger dreams, because like I said, there's no shortage of people out there that are going to tell you, oh, who are you to be doing that? Or you're not very good at that, or, what have you. In my writers, I belong to a writers group. I belong to several writers groups. One of the most common themes in that group is self-doubt and struggling with self-doubt. And it can be completely debilitating. I totally get why a lot of writers and artists drink or use drugs, because it's very difficult to sit there every single day and to create something, and then to think, there's days where you will feel like, man, what I really wrote, I think that's really great. And then you come back to it the next day and you're like, this is garbage. I have no talent. I don't know what I was thinking. Who am I? And then it's just all of this landslide of self-doubt and questioning yourself. And it can bring out the best in a person, and it can bring out the worst in a person. So I think realizing that there's a fantastic book out there called The War of Art by Michael Pressfield. And he talks about this kind of basically anytime we go to do something creative, I think especially, but anytime we go to do something new, we're going to encounter resistance. And that resistance can really be debilitating. And we have to kind of stare into that void every single day. And that's the war. Like, we go to war with that resistance. And that resistance will tell us, that we need a degree. Who are you to be writing a book? You need to have a master's in fine arts, and you need to have a master's in creative writing, and you need to be something other than you are, and you need to have written more, and you need to, should. Who are you to be doing this? Maybe your writing teacher was right. All of that chatter kicks up. That's just resistance. And every single person struggles with this. But I think what can be so isolating is because most people don't talk about that. Again, what we tend to see from other people in general is this scripted reality. Whether it's intended or not, I think most people tend to not talk about this, because I think most of us tend to think, oh, it's just me that feels that way. All these other people in, my writers group, it's so interesting, because when we get new members in there, everybody has the same fears. Okay. And over time, about a month or two in, they'll slowly kind of inch out of their comfort zone, and they'll just say, I just published my book and I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like, what's wrong with me? Or I just got my book back from the editor, and it's all 90% of it's all marked up in red ink. And maybe I'm not a good author. Or, well, maybe I'm not good at this. I mean, because the group I'm in, there's people that haven't even published yet, and there's people in there that are multimillionaires. Like, it's a wide range of people. And for the new members that hear about all of the success of these older members that have been writing, you can get in there and be like, oh my goodness, I'll never make that kind of money. Or man, these people are publishing like 5 or 6 books a year. And it took me 3 years to write my first book. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So I guess what I'm saying is we have to be really careful about comparison, because more often than not, what we're doing is we are a beginner and we're comparing ourselves. Nobody starts at the finish line, right? And so it's not an accurate comparison to be like, oh, what's so wrong with me? They've been writing for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, they've got a process down, they're organized, they've got a team of editors and test readers and all kinds of stuff. And so I think, really develop strong dreams and realize that if somebody else has figured a lot of this stuff out, that you can too. You just got to figure out, like, well, what did they do to get where they are with whatever it might be? And to just get really determined, really, really determined with whatever it is that you want to do. There's this concept in Buddhism called the beginner's mind. And I love this concept. It's one of my favorites. And it's this concept that, whenever we start out with something, we have that beginner's mind. We don't know what we don't know. Everything is new and exciting. We're seeing things with this completely fresh perspective, for better or for worse, right? This completely fresh perspective. And we start off and we're like, it's like 2 left feet, and we're a hot mess and we're falling down and we don't know what we're doing and we're just all over the place. But there's such this like sacredness of that moment, because we can only ever have that moment once. And then we're no longer a beginner. We've begun. And then as you move down that path, then you start learning new skills and you start figuring stuff out and you start moving forward, and it becomes easier and easier, and you start finding your flow and you start adjusting and adapting. And it goes back to having that growth mindset, and a big part of growth is that adaptation. It's figuring, hey, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and why. One of the most successful people I've ever met had once said something along the lines of, like, whenever he is trying, in order to be successful with like a new project, he realizes that he really needs to like triple his rate of failure. Because the more things he tries, the more he's going to adjust, the faster he's going to learn. And if you're not learning, if you're not failing, if you're not failing and if you're not learning, then you're not really trying that hard at the end of the day. Then you're just playing it safe. So, there's that other saying too, that life happens just outside of your comfort zone. And that's so, so true, especially when it comes to trying something new. We have to risk looking like a fool. You have to risk, if you're going to play tennis, like, you're going to have to, probably trip and fall and miss the ball and hit the net and, not know what you're doing. Or I remember one time my ex-husband and I, he liked to play golf. And I thought to myself, well, how hard can it be? Right. So I'll go play with you, And so I went this one day and, oh my God, I had no idea golf was so difficult. I mean, I'd gone putting before. Yeah, totally different. I was so embarrassed because there's people waiting on you, It's like you're at this, you've got a putt and then you go to the next hole. And I was taking chunks out of this golf course. I could not hit that ball to save my life. And everybody's staring at me and waiting on me. And, so that kind of stuff can be intimidating, but it's just all part of the process of doing something different, doing something new. If you can embrace failure, if you can embrace, and I think just own it, just be like, oh yeah, yep, my first day, just own it. Then you're fine. It's when we get so caught up in that shame and guilt and embarrassment and all of that, thinking that we should it goes back to that clinging and craving. We want to be better at this. We want the finish line. We want to be, this really successful author or this semi-proficient golfer, or, we feel like we should be, it's just all of that clinging and craving that keeps us locked in that pain. But it is what it is. Like, you start where you start. Nobody starts at the finish line, and you just keep moving forward. Along the same lines, I had a friend, this was years ago, 10, 15 years ago. He had started a blog. He wanted to be a motivational speaker, and really neat guy. He owned a Kung Fu studio. I forget where he lived, Washington, maybe. Anyways, he owned a Kung Fu place, and he really wanted to become a motivational speaker. So he starts this blog, and he was like, he has dyslexia. He's like, I've never been a strong writer. And his writing was really bad. Like, no joke. It was pretty bad. But he stuck with it. And we'd kind of lost touch over the years, but he kept blogging. And he is now I think he might even be the national trainer for Tony Robbins. And he still writes. I just came across one of his blog posts the other day. He's a fantastic writer now, but he's stuck with it. So I guess the point is, even if you might not have that natural talent, determination and hard work goes a long way. Okay. Let me scroll up. Sable says, yawn, golf. I'd rather watch drawing paint. No offense, Dana. Hey man, I only played golf that once. It did nothing for me. I do not have the patience to learn golf. And I thought it would be good because there's a lot of walking. But yeah, it's not it just didn't do a lot for me either. That's funny. Jennifer says, oh my God, I thought roller skating was going to be so much easier than roller blading. Oh no. I tried it and I couldn't even bend my knees, but I did it and I was all right. I probably won't do it again, but at least I tried. That's so funny. I thought the same thing about roller blading. I'm like, okay, well, roller blading is like roller skating, right? And I can somewhat roller skate. Oh no, it's not. I can't even stand up on roller blades. Like, it's hilarious. I do not know how people rollerblade. It looks like so much fun, but I have never been able to do it. People are talking about doing new things. Kiara says, hey, Dana, when in public, I almost feel as if I developed this goofy, overly kind personality that is nothing like my own. If I don't do it, I feel as though I will be labeled as mean. What do I do? Well, I guess maybe ask yourself, what would happen if people labeled you? Generally, people are not going to label you as mean, right? Especially for like one or two events, especially if you're not being mean. So if you're just saying no, or you're just kind of being normal, your people that like you for you are going to like you for you. So, and then the rest of the people, if they do think you're mean, like, oh, how dare you say no to me? How dare you not do what I want to do? Like, those kinds of people, those aren't your people. Like, who cares, right? Like, who cares what they think? And then even asking yourself, like, who cares if they think you're mean? What would happen? So what? They think you're mean, and then what? Sort of like we were talking about failing. Okay, so what? Those people at the golf course thought, who cares what they thought? And even still, like even with writing books and stuff, I mean, that gave me so much anxiety hitting publish, because then your work's out there, like it's done and it's in print and you can't take that back. Those will always exist. Every typo that's been made, every grammatical error, everything that you might have done wrong, it is out there in the world for, you know, like all of time. And that's very intimidating. But then, you have to kind of make peace with, like, you know what? There's a lot of things I did do different with my second book. Like with my first book, yeah, you know what? It was my first book and I didn't know what I didn't know. I did a lot of things wrong. And I would go about writing a book very differently now. And some people are probably really going to hate it. And they're going to think that, who am I to write a book? And they're going to have all kinds of opinions. And that's okay. Like, that's all part of it. But I know my truth. I know that I want to, and I'm not going to start at the finish line, right? Like, what I can do for my first book is very different than somebody who's already written and published 10 books. So all I can do is all I can do. So I'm going to start where I am and I'm going to put out the best book I possibly can. And hopefully, with hard work and determination and learning new things and talking to other authors and all this stuff, with every book that keeps coming out, it's going to get progressively better and better. So it's just kind of making peace with yourself of like, this is where you are. This is where you're starting. This is not where you're going to stay, right? And who cares what other people think? Like, they're going to have their opinions, and then so what? And some of the thing that can help too, if you're thinking about doing anything, I think it can always help. Go to Amazon. Go look, even if you're not a writer, go look at your favorite writer, whoever that might be. Maybe it's J.K. Rowling for Harry Potter series, or Stephen King, or Eckhart Tolle. Go read their 1-star reviews. People are harsh. Eckhart Tolle once said he had a guy who bought his book, who ripped it up and then mailed it back to him, telling him how it was garbage and how awful it was. So like, these things happen. And it's important for us to not get derailed by the haters out there. 10% of the people out there are going to hate whatever you do. You cannot walk on enough eggshells for them. You cannot be people pleasing enough. You can't be a biggest doormat. Like, there's nothing that you can do. They're going to hate whatever you do because they just are that way. There's going to be 10% that are going to love you. No matter what you do, they are your people. They get you, they resonate with you, they cheer you on. They're fans. Like, that's like your people. And then 80% of people fall somewhere in between. And I think what really trips so many of us up is when we encounter people that are haters or that are not supportive, if we're not grounded enough in what we want to do, whatever it is that you want to do. If you want to become an architect, or you want to study Spanish, or you want to cut your hair, or you want to grow your hair, or you want to do whatever it is that you want to do, to realize we're going to encounter that resistance, to prepare for it. So how are you going to handle it when that happens? Because it will happen. Okay, let's see. Jennifer was talking about practicing stuff and says her narc dad bought her a guitar for Christmas one year because he knew I wanted one. But to this day, I still don't practice, mostly because I don't want to disturb people, mostly in my building. Yeah. I mean, and you can go play in a park, right? Like, you could go play in the parking lot. You could go play in your car. You could just play quietly. As long as it's like reasonable hours, to me, it doesn't have to be louder than having the TV on, Okay. Let me scroll up here. Scrolling. Sable says, yeah, golf is for privileged people with money and time to kill. It is an expensive hobby if you don't have your own clubs and you don't have like a public course, for sure. For sure. Good for you. Kiara says, thank you, Dana. I'm a songwriter and a writer. I haven't written a song in a long time, and I'm approaching doing it again. Perfectionism and fearing mistakes aren't going to stop me. That's awesome. That's awesome. You don't let that. If you are a reader, read that book, The War of Art. It's just fantastic. Actually, there's several interviews with Stephen Pressfield on YouTube. If you're interested in that too, you can just find him by searching War of Art in YouTube. One of the exercises, so my mom is an artist, and one of the exercises that she did, and she also comes from this very, I would say, almost miserly mentality. You know, she grew up dirt poor, and you know, her parents, kind of this whole very depression mentality of, you know, you just don't waste anything. And so for her to become an artist and to practice with paint and paper, I think still causes her tremendous amounts of anxiety. She has a really hard time getting over that because it feels wasteful. And she had an instructor once for this art class who they were going to practice this new, I don't know, this new painting skill, this new painting technique. And so my mom was saying, and I totally get this because I'm the exact same way in art classes that I've taken, where like you want to paint something that you actually like. And so most people, because of that, they tend to play it safe. They tend to just kind of paint in the style that they know because they don't want to just waste something. And then at the end of the class, the instructor had them tear it up. And something along the lines of like every day of the class that they were going to tear up what they did at the end of the day. And I loved that she had people do that because it really helped to free up this idea of, oh, I don't want to waste anything. Like, I don't want to, but it's like, no, there's just like this collateral damage with learning anything new, especially with art. Like you're going to go through paper or just like with cooking, you know, like you're going to learn, like not everything's going to turn out tasting good. So you got to kind of account for that, you know, but that's the only way we will figure this out is to try and to just keep at it. I can't even imagine, you know, being a writer back, you know, think about these, especially women writers back in like the 1800s, you know, or even earlier where women, you know, you didn't have an education and writing was something that it was not something that women did. And you had paper and you had ink, and it was like these ink pens. It was very expensive to be a writer, and you really didn't want to waste anything. And you oftentimes had to hide what you were doing because it wasn't seen as very ladylike to actually write. So I just think, oh my God, they had so many more challenges back then. And now, you know, to be a writer, all you need was paper and pen, or you just need, Word, Microsoft Word, and you just go at it and you just write and write. It doesn't cost you very much, you know. It's just awesome, this stuff that we have nowadays. That's a good point. Truth Seeker says, yes, if you've ever met a narcissist who builds you up only to sabotage you, that means you are a person of greatness. I agree. Just like that gal that wrote that book, The Romancing the Stone, her writing teacher, you know, odds are he was threatened by her on some level. And it's It's takes a lot of courage to show your work, whether you're an artist or a writer or, you know, what have you. And it really just makes me so angry that there's such ugly people out there that go around tearing other people down. You know, when your creativity is such a personal thing, it's just such a form of betrayal and just so gross that people do that. Okay. Kiara says, okay, what are some good ways to get organized? I'm an artist and I have issues with managing my time and having time to create. My supplies are a bit messy too. Any other artists, please answer. One thing that helps for me with just organization in general, there was a book I read a long time ago. It's just so funny. Like, I don't even know if it would have the same impact on me that nowadays, but it was exactly what I needed to read like 15 years ago. And it was a book by Julie Morgenstern called Organizing from the Inside Out. And I guess I just needed to have somebody spell it out to me how to get organized. I just didn't get it before. And I read that book and it was just like all kinds of light bulbs went on and it just really changed my life in so many ways. And I think some of the big takeaways from that book was about organizing. So putting like objects together. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, what used to trip me up was I would organize a space based on how I thought it should look versus based on how I actually used it. So I would, like, I was organizing this life that I felt like I should have or that I might have someday versus the life that I actually lived. So I had a place, you know, in my office for the mail, but the reality was the mail went on the kitchen counter as soon as I walked in, which was why the mail kept getting shuffled around and lost and misplaced and chaos would ensue. So then just coming to peace with the fact of, okay, this is my pattern. This is where I normally put the mail. Probably not going to stop putting the mail here anytime soon. So I need to develop a more organized system for where the mail really goes when I walk in the door. You know, and then same thing just with like art supplies and stuff. For example, like if you have pastels, putting all your pastels together. If you have oil paints, putting all your oil paints together, maybe then organizing them by color, organizing brush by like brush type or brush size, or, you know, keeping all of your paper together. Just, I don't know. That was a big thing. Like with like, one of the things I do with my closet that really helped is when I take an article of clothing off of a hanger, I take the empty hanger and I put it at the front of the rack. So I don't have, so my closet, all of the empty hangers are all hanging in the same spot. So I don't have like clothes, empty hanger, empty hanger, empty hanger, skirt, empty hanger, shirt, shirt, shirt. I don't have that. So that way I'm not fishing for hangers. They're all at the front of the closet. Like little things like that really helped. And then my closet for a long time was basically organized by color from lightest to darkest. So I just kind of knew and then short sleeve to long sleeve within each color. It sounds very OCD, but it made my life so much easier because sometimes I would know, I'm like, I'm just in the mood to wear like a black shirt. Well, then I could tell at a glance, these are all the black shirts I have. So do I want short sleeve or do I want long sleeve? It just, I don't know. I think it's just kind of figuring out like what organizationally works best for you. And then to keep trying to have that attitude of curiosity. So as you will find what's working, what's not working, and why. So if you're still bouncing checks, if you're still losing mail, if stuff's still not working, okay, there's still something going on in your organizational process. So now it's time to just get curious instead of getting upset with yourself and being like, why can't I ever get a hold on this? I should have this figured out by now, blah, blah, blah. You know, and you start in on getting all upset with yourself. Like that's not helpful. So thinking about, okay, what is not working here? And just being real about it. Like I was saying, one of the things that helped me the most was just realizing, oh my God, I kept thinking that I should have all of my mail in my office. I never go in my office. So I had some mail in there that I would forget about. And I had some mail in the kitchen. I had some mail in my purse. I had some mail in the passenger seat of the car. And I was like, bills were late and it was just chaos was ensuing because I didn't have an effective system because I wasn't embracing the reality. I was still kind of caught up in this fantasy of what my office should look like, what I should be like, instead of like, no, this is just really what it is, and how it is fine. So I just need to organize around how it is, So thank you, New Chris, for the live stream donation. Says, well, I've fallen from recovery superstar to near rock bottom after a relapse. It's tough, but I'm very grateful for Dana and for the group. Well, thank you. And, sometimes those relapses, sometimes in this, please don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes in many ways they can be exactly what we needed, because it's sort of like that failing forward. It might be that time where we're like, okay, yeah, now I know for absolutely sure that they haven't changed, or you learn something new about yourself, or there's oftentimes some of the biggest lessons come from some of the biggest setbacks. So I hope you get to feeling more emotionally stable soon with all of this. Okay, let me scroll down here. Robert's talking about having a hard time overcoming depression, wanting to go try some new hobby. Yeah. Well, if you're open to meetup groups, I think they can be a fantastic way to get out there. There's so many groups out there these days, all over the world. So that might be something worth looking into. And, you just never know who you're going to meet at these groups. And it could be, you could make some really good friends from these things, or at least you'll meet some really interesting people. It can kind of go one or two ways. Yes, Karen, very well said. Says, we don't drown by falling in the water. We drown by staying there. Yes, that's very true. Gigi, I agree. Says, I can understand the link between trauma and hoarding. Yes, I agree. Pete Walker, in his book, The PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, he talks about, hold on a second, the different defense mechanisms. And he talks about a fight, flight, freeze friend. Yeah. He doesn't call it friend. What does he call it? I call it friend, because to me that makes fawn. He calls it fawn. But like fawning over somebody, I call it friend. So it's kind of that ingratiating type behavior. I think there's also an added defense mechanism, and that one is of foraging, which would be with food, with stuff, with hoarding, that kind of stuff. And I agree completely. I think that's when you've gone through some sort of trauma, it's just amazing how your eyes open to the stuff and you're like, I get it now. Like, I totally get how a person could become really ingratiating, or they could become a hoarder, or that they could gain 300 pounds, or that, they become really angry and they get locked into that like fight defense. So. Yeah, I developed this weird thing with food. It's not extreme, but food hoarding. And I noticed this a couple years ago. Travis and I still he went grocery shopping today, and he was in the kitchen and he was going to throw out some potato salad. And he'll wait until I'm out of the house to clean out the fridge because it gives me so much anxiety. And I'll start picking stuff out of the trash. And I'm like, no, this is fine. There's like 3 more bites left in this. And like, this is perfectly good. What are you doing? And he's like, Dana, we just got a new head of lettuce. Like, this one is brown and wilty. And I'm like, no, it's still fine. Like, I can still use that for a sandwich tomorrow. And this was exactly the conversation tonight, as a matter of fact. And so here I am, like, holding on to all of this food. And it's just, I've gotten so much better about it. When I moved out of my last place and he was helping me clean, and I said, okay, I'm bringing over all of my food to your house. And, you know, so it was all of these like plastic bags full of food. A lot of it was expired. Like I had like quinoa that had expired like 6 years ago. Here's what's even crazier about this. A lot of this food, especially the dried food, I had paid to move from New Mexico to Michigan. I had been carting this food around for years. And it was just, it's sad. Like, it made me sad. I'm like, where did this come from? And what am I doing? And why am I still doing this? You know, but, yeah, it's interesting the stuff that our brain does. Bonnie says, okay, I'm going to go through my pantry. Yep. Expired food from Y2K. Haha. Yes. Yeah. Jennifer says, I've gotten the habit of hoarding things like ketchup packets from my mom. I think it also comes from growing up in poverty. Yeah, I agree. I think part of it for me comes from growing up with a mother like that, because she grew up so poor that they had neighbors that would feel sorry for them and like periodically leave groceries on their doorstep. Like, that's how poor she was growing up. And, you know, and then she also had a father who was a narcissist, who any money he did have, and he was a minister, he would be considered an altruistic narcissist, I'm sure. You know, it was all about him and him kind of appearances. And so he had a brand new car and he had nice clothes, but it was only him. His wife and children had next to nothing. So, and my grandmother was very much the same way. I mean, after they finally got a divorce and stuff, I mean, she just was on such a shoestring budget. I mean, it just broke my heart. She would, if she had 2 bites of a sandwich left, she would save it in the fridge. You know, you just didn't waste anything. And my mom is very much the same way. I remember being a kid and have it like, you know, like, I don't know, a moldy brick of cheese in the fridge. My mom would just cut around it. And it's like, no, there's still parts in there that are good. You just eat it. Or really expired food, you know, like salad dressing. And when I go to her house, when I go to visit, you know, and if I'm like, Mom, and she's gotten so much better over the years, but I would go over there. I'm like, when I was a teenager, especially, I'm like, Mom, we have nothing. Everything in this fridge is expired. Like, I can't cut around enough mold. Like, there's nothing here. Like, we need to go grocery shopping. And I would start throwing food away and she would get all kinds of anxious about it. And she's like, what are you doing? We're not going to have anything to eat. And she had plenty of money. Like, that was what was so nuts, is there was money, but in her mind, it was never enough. And because that was her mentality, that it was never enough, that there was never enough money, that it was that attitude of scarcity, she was never going to feel like there was enough, because her brain kept telling her that there wasn't enough. So, yeah, my grandmother had an apple tree in her backyard. And I remember when we moved her out of her home and she came to live with us, and she had all these freezers in her basement. And I guess we just never really opened them because we weren't over there a lot and it was her basement. And it was full. She'd made apple jelly. She'd made apple pies. She'd made apple, cider, apple, everything, apple, anything that you could think of. She was making with those apples because she didn't want to waste them. And it was refrigerators and freezers full of stuff. Athera asks, do narcissists hide their children or deny them? It depends. If it's whatever whatever suits them at the time. So if they don't want to pay child support, yeah. If they, if they don't think that they're new, if it's gonna cramp their style, then yeah, they're gonna deny having kids and they're not gonna step up at all. You're not dealing with a person who bonds to other people in the same way as a normal person. So that was one of the earliest red flags I had with Jack, is when it was such a weird time. But anyways, kind of long story short, I ended up leaving for a time, and he had packed the only thing that he had from his daughter, who lived in Germany. And he'd left there when she was like 3 years old, and had this whole story about how his ex was keeping her from him. And he didn't really even think she was his to begin with, and blah, blah, blah. But he loved that little girl like his own. And of course, I just took it all for face value. But I remember thinking that was so weird that the one thing he had from this little girl was something he put in my suitcase. And there was a solid chance I'd never see him again. And I hardly knew him. And of course, knowing what I know now, I'm like, yeah, he doesn't care about that little girl. Like, who does? If you cared about, like, you wouldn't give somebody something of that significance if you really cared about her. It was just all part of his just giant manipulation. So, Challenge Me says, what do you think about HG Tutor video and advice as a narcissist himself? I've never watched his videos or his advice. I personally find any of that to be pointless. Like, I don't, every narcissist and sociopath is different. So I think it's silly. Silly. Maybe the word malingering comes to mind too. Malingering, and I don't know, I don't know. I don't think highly of it. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. Probably if he's even a real character. I think he's a good marketer, and I think he's created this whole persona. Whatever. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. But even if it's not a bunch of nonsense, right? To me, there's no value. Like, I don't give a care what a narcissist thinks. Because even if he is a narcissist, he doesn't speak for all narcissists. He's not your ex, right? He's him. So his motivation, his drive, his desire may not be the same as your ex, because they're all individuals, So what drives one person to do something is going to be very different than what drives another person to do something. So in that sense, I see there's no value in hearing what. It's just like if you're trying to figure out, like, why does a diabetic do what they do? Why does my grandmother continue to eat candy? Why, she's had a leg amputated, and then talking to another person who's a diabetic. Like, they're not the same people. So their motivations are very different. So whatever that other person's telling you about why diabetics do what they do may not be why your grandma's doing what she's doing. So I think the point is, yeah. And Free Spirit, and I agree. Free Spirit says, HG Tutor helped me to get over my cognitive dissonance. I think that's the one benefit to channels like HG Tutor and Sam Vaknin, is that I think it does help for them, whether or not any of that's even real or not. I don't even know. I don't care. But I think that people need I think there is some value in them hearing it from people that are claimed to be narcissists or psychopaths or whatever. It helps to put a face to that level of evil. For somebody just to say, yes, I am a narcissist. I am big and dark and scary and blah, and I don't care about you. And I think there just needs to be that level of hearing that. I never went through that when I went through everything. So, and I also never even thought to look on YouTube. Had I thought to look on YouTube, maybe I would have sought out that kind of stuff. I don't know, but I haven't listened. I don't listen to any of that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, I think you need to do what you need to do to find the clarity and the validation that you need. So I have my own biases, obviously, when it comes to what helps and what doesn't help. Don't let that sway you from doing what you're doing if what you're doing is helping you, I guess is what I'm saying at the end of the day. Yeah, Nikki's saying, I believe talking to other survivors is what helps heal. You know, that's what helped me the most. Out of all the therapy, out of all of the, I mean, I had a ton of training when I worked at a domestic violence shelter. I had a ton more training as a psych nurse. That what helped me the most was talking to other survivors and hearing the same types of situations, people asking the same types of questions, the all of it. It was just so validating of like, okay, I'm not crazy for thinking this or for feeling this way or for going through this, or like, and I'm not alone, that they've all experienced this too. Because there's, like I was saying earlier, there's so much shame surrounding this. And it's so easy for people to think that we're the only ones that are going through this, even though we know, like, right, there's, I don't know how many people, 138 people on this live stream right now. Even though we know that we're not alone, because there's, 130 other people here. But I think everybody still kind of harbors that doubt of like, well, maybe their situation doesn't quite match mine. So maybe it's just the cognitive dissonance, right, is so real. And people can really struggle with that. And they think, and it's like if somebody else's situation like doesn't match yours exactly, then a person can be kind of lost in that fog again and goes back to that confusion. So I think support groups are great, especially if you get into a couple of support groups or you get into a few really large ones and you're reading, it's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And it really just hammers home that level of selfishness of other people and that they have no moral compass and there is no depth. Like nothing is sacred. They will lie about having their own, I mean, just stuff that normal people we can't even comprehend, that they just don't care about their own children, that they don't bond to other people, that just the level of like moral depravity and the lies and the deceit, when you hear it from enough people, it starts sinking in. You're able to cut through that cognitive dissonance and you're like, okay, well, maybe, my friends or my family or my therapist, because it can be easy to just think, oh, well, they're just telling me that because they're telling me that because that's my therapist, or they're telling me that because they're friends or family. But when you start hearing it from a bunch of other strangers, then it's sort of like, okay, no, I think they like really mean it. This is really their situation. This is really what's going on. They've lived it. They know what they're talking about. So. Yeah. Kiara says, hey, Dana, I suck at waking up early and I've realized it might have something to do with emotional exhaustion. When I wake up late, I feel really depressed. Any tips or advice, anyone? Well, I mean, and it could be depression. It could be just adrenal fatigue, just exhaustion. This is a lot. I mean, you might have seen this meme floating around on the internet, but it's so true. And it says something like, survival, what is it? Kind of like fight or flight is meant to be a defense mechanism. It's not meant to be how you live your life. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so when a person is in, especially if there's kind of this barrage of psychological abuse and verbal abuse and this mental anguish that a person continues to go through, it's exhausting. And when all of that comes to a halt and the relationship's over, it's like your body just it needs to rest. And then it's hard to rest because your brain's still trying to figure out everything that happened. And then you've got life, right? Like you might have a job and a kid and responsibility and bills and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to try to heal and still live life and figure out what happened and all of it. It's a lot. Jill says the cognitive dissonance sounds really scary. Do we ever get over this narc BS? Let's talk about that for a second. Hold on a second. This tea is so good. Okay, so cognitive dissonance. I know there's a lot of these words, right, that really do sound scary, like PTSD and cognitive dissonance, and maybe those being the scariest ones. But cognitive dissonance is something that we all experience on a daily basis. And people experience it more often in abusive relationships. But it's a really interesting concept. So if you can see it in your life in other ways, identifying what it is can really help set you free from a lot of problematic situations. So here's an example of maybe cognitive dissonance that I think a lot of people are familiar with. So let's say, for example, you start gaining weight, but you don't realize it. And then one day your pants don't fit. Okay. So there's that feeling of, that's really weird. Like my pants are really tight. So cognitive dissonance is when we have two conflicting thoughts about the same concept at the same time. So if our thought about our weight or our pants not fitting is, oh my gosh, have I gained weight? But then we're like, no, I haven't. I don't think I've gained weight. Like I haven't really been eating anything terribly different. So if we're like, we're not really sure what's going on, we're going to gloss as it pertains to our action. So if we don't think that we've gained weight, then we're not going to do anything to change how we eat. So we're going to offer up a justification. Maybe my pants shrank in the dryer. Maybe I haven't worn these pants in a long time, and maybe I gained weight a long time ago. Maybe I'm bloated. Maybe I ate a lot of salt last night for dinner and I'm just bloated. Maybe I had a lot of water to drink. I bet that's it. I had 4 cups of coffee this morning and a lot of water last night. I bet that's why my pants are really tight. And so we're going to justify it. Okay. And if we don't do anything different, if we're not changing how much exercise we're getting or what we're eating, then let's say fast forward 2 months. Okay. We go to put on the same pair of pants and now they don't even zip. And so then now we're confused. Okay. If we're still in denial about us gaining weight, then we're going to continue to justify it. That's so weird. That dryer really has been shrinking clothes. That's so strange. Boy, I guess, I didn't realize I turned it on that high setting, but I must have, because now my pants don't fit. Or, well, I guess it is really right after Christmas. So I probably gained, 5 pounds over Christmas, but I'll lose it. If we're in denial, we're going to continue to justify it. We're going to continue to experience that confusion when our reality doesn't match up with what's going on in our head. So that's a very common way we experience it. When people are in an abusive relationship, whether it's verbally or emotionally or psychologically abusive, it's because abuse tends to start off gradually. So let's say, for example, if everything is fine, there's that idealized stage, you're getting along with them wonderfully, and then out of the clear blue, they might call you a name, or they yell at you, or they snap at you, or they give you the silent treatment, or it's just something where you're like, wait, what? There's that sense of confusion. And then there's that sense of introspection. Is it me or is it them? Like, what's going on here? And then they're confused. And then there's trying to kind of figure all that out, right? So that's how it normally goes in abuse. But if we don't want to leave, if we want to keep that relationship going, we're going to continue justifying their behavior. Well, you know what? I bet they yelled at me because they had a hard day at work. Or, you know what? We have a new baby. I bet they're stressed out. Or, you know what? They yelled at me because I forgot to buy ketchup at the grocery store. I guess it's my fault. I should have remembered to buy ketchup. And we justify it. And then it happens again. And then we justify it again. And it happens again. And it starts happening more and more. And we continue to justify it more and more. And then things get to this level of craziness where we're continually trying to justify things that are absolutely a problem. So another example of this, like on a more global level. So this is the same thing that happens with people when they get into cults. And this is the same thing when you're talking more like political narcissism. So for example, like with dictators like Hitler. So here you had a whole country that was under the spell of cognitive dissonance. And I shouldn't say a whole country, because I'm sure that there were a handful of people in there, probably larger than a handful of people, like people that were like, ooh, this isn't cool, right? Like this is a problem. And of course, probably all the Jewish people would be in that group of like, hey, whoa, this is really scary stuff. What's going on? But I'm sure that there were a lot of non-Jewish people that were like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? But it starts off slow. Okay, everybody needs to just you're going to wear, a gold star or like a yellow armband. Or, okay, well, we're going to seize your bank accounts. Okay, well, now there's going to be a curfew for certain people. And then it's just this slippery slope. And the next thing you know, boom, you've got gas chambers. So it's seeing problematic behavior for what it is as early on as possible, and then, responding appropriately. But we all slip into cognitive dissonance. So it's important to pay attention to how it feels. It's that level of confusion. When we're continually denying things, we become more perpetually confused. And this, of course, is especially the case when you're dealing with a manipulative person, like a cult leader, like a dictator, like an abusive partner or parent, who's continually telling you that there's nothing wrong. Oh, no, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I never said that. That never happened. If I did say it, or if it did happen, you're to blame. And they're continuing to put it back on other people, on you. I never cheated on you. And then you find out, okay, actually they got this other woman pregnant because now she's suing for child support. Okay, well, I did cheat on you, but it was only that one time and she meant nothing. And then you find out, okay, actually, no, they've been sleeping together for 6 years. And, and it's just this constant lies. But if we're trying to continue to hold on to this relationship that we think we have, we've got to continue justifying this, because if we actually admit it to ourselves that this person's a pathological liar and they don't care about us or about the other person, we'd have to leave. But if we don't want to leave, we're going to have to justify to ourselves how to stay. So it's, cognitive dissonance, interesting stuff. Yes. So I guess it's a psychological phenomenon. It happens to everybody. And the human brain is interesting. And do we ever really get over this? Like, yeah, you can. You really, really can. And I think it goes back to like what I was saying earlier, kind of developing that growth mentality of squeezing out as much as you possibly can from this situation. It's a process. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, it really is a process. But, if you can get there and you can start moving forward as of now, you can start squeezing out as much as you possibly can, taking all of the anger and the rage or the hurt and channeling it into building a better life for yourself, whatever that might look like, in big and small ways. there's so much to learn in all of this, with as far as like your boundaries and I guarantee if you ever had healthy boundaries and standards to begin with, and the vast majority of people out there don't, I don't care what anybody else says. I just have found that to be the case. Like the vast majority of people out there have really, it's easy to think you have strong boundaries if they've never really been tested. It's just like all of Germany. Like you get a strong personality like that, and then you kind of get the peer pressure from everybody around you. Nobody thinks that they get caught up in stuff like that until they do. And then when it happens, they're shocked at what happened. So, but examining. So anyways, your boundaries and standards have been eroded in ways that you haven't even begun to realize. That's just the case whenever you're dealing with a manipulative person of any kind. So going back through, examining those, kind of figuring out, okay, what needs work. We do a book club here it's the last Thursday of every month. And we discuss different books pertaining to this topic. And I think that can definitely be a big help. And we discuss boundaries and standards and deal breakers and stuff like that here on a fairly regular basis, because it is important. So, Angie and I were talking yesterday. Sorry, I'm putting on my shoe here. My feet are cold. And Angie and I were talking yesterday about, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Boundaries and standards. Oh, healing from this. So people tend to think of healing as going back to the way that they were. And that alone keeps a lot of people stuck. It kept me stuck for a long time too. And realizing that healing, that life, like I was saying, is all about growth. And growth is all about moving forward. Growth is never about moving backwards. So understanding that healing isn't about going back to who you were before all this happened. Healing is about creating a new and empowering normal for yourself. Because now your eyes are open to a lot of stuff that they weren't before. So, even though you might feel broken, you might feel emotionally devastated or blown apart, like you can take all of this and use it for your highest and greatest good, and really kind of create this really empowering new sense of normal. And so you can be even better. Like your life can be even better than it was before. It takes work, but like Angie and I were saying yesterday, there's this power in having your life blown apart like this. When your life is so blown apart, like emotionally and physically and financially and spiritually and in every way, shape, or form, the beauty in that is that when you go to rebuild it, you can rebuild it consciously, piece by piece. So you can you question everything. You question your understanding of, your boundaries and your standards and your deal breakers, and, the kind of job that you have and the city that you live in. And like, you're just questioning everything and trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I want in this next chapter of my life? It's powerful stuff. And, most people don't, they don't ever get to that place where they can examine everything in their life, because they have it sucks. Like it sucks having to rebuild your life from scratch, right? Like nobody really wants to do that if they don't have to. But when you're in a position where you're forced to, in a way, it's kind of it can really be a blessing, because a lot of people live lives that don't work, and they've been doing this for 40 years. And it's just these lives of like quiet desperation. They don't like their spouse. They don't like their job. They don't like the city that they live in. They belong to a religion that they don't agree with. It's just all of these things, all for keeping the peace. And because they can't quit this job because they have bills for this house that they don't even like, or to help support this spouse that they don't even like. And it's just none of their life is working, but they'd rather stay with what they know than to try to, do something different. So when you're in a position where you're forced to do something different, in a way, it's kind of like, okay, now the magic can actually happen. You are in control of your life. You are the creator. So what do you want to have happen in this next chapter? So it's powerful, powerful stuff. And I just realized I thought I set my timer and I did not. I didn't hit start. Dana. So time. So we are at the 3-hour mark in like 2 minutes. So Missouri Cowboy says, talking about Henry Cloud, he says, Henry Cloud uses quotes from the Bible in the book. I didn't read it for a while due to my experience with the Pentecostal church. Yet I found it also assisted the abuse by church. Yeah, there's a lot of people, I think, and sometimes it's intended, sometimes it's not intended, that can really twist scripture into supporting abuse. It's just one of those things. I think unless a person really lives it, they're not even aware that they're twisting things, because when abuse enters the equation, a lot of this well-intended bad advice of, it's important to forgive and love doesn't keep a toll of any wrongs, or whatever, commitments forever. I mean, all of this kind of stuff, that's all fine and good if we're talking about within the context of two normal people going through the highs and lows of life together. Totally different scenario when you're dealing with an abusive person. And, in my book, anytime there's abuse that enters in the equation, manipulation enters in the equation. And manipulation has a really funny way of taking a really beautiful concept like commitment is forever and twisting it into something dark and toxic and ugly. And it's really, that's why to me, abuse is always an instant deal breaker, because things get so skewed and so twisted that it's really hard to try to make sense of things, to try to get out from underneath that and to untangle everything. So to me, it's one of my deal breakers. It's not workable, period. Any form of abuse is not workable because it just twists things so incredibly much. But as real quick though, too, as far as spirituality is concerned and God is concerned and all that, my grandmother, she was married to a minister who was a narcissist, and she always was able to keep her faith in God. I found that very strange for decades, really. And my mom lost her faith in God during all of that, because she just saw how much of a hypocrite her father was and how much of just a disgusting human being he was. He was a womanizer. I think he was probably also a pedophile. You just, really put on this really amazing show for everybody else until they would catch on, and then they would get, he kind of got chased out of church after church after church. And so she was always embarrassed by his behavior, and her poor mother was losing her mind and walking on all kinds of eggshells, trying to keep him faithful and home, and trying to earn his loyalty and dignity and respect. And of course that never works, because it's not about her, it's about him, right? But one of the most powerful things that my mother ever said to me, so my mom ended up finding faith in God when probably 20 years or so after her parents' divorce. And I had asked her about that one time, because I was angry. I was angry with God over what happened to my grandma, because she was such a wonderful, kind, good, just the sweetest woman you can even imagine. She just was so good, and so did not that anybody does deserve to be treated like this, but she really didn't deserve to be treated like how she was treated. And my mom had said one time, I asked her, I said, how did you get to that place? Like, how do you believe in God after everything that grandma went through? How do you believe in God? How do you share a God with what, your father did? And she said, you know what? She had to come to the conclusion that she had to make the decision to not let anybody keep her from God. And I thought that was really powerful, and it makes total sense. It's like, yeah, you know what? Your relationship with God is that's between you and God, and to not let somebody else damage your relationship with God, because God didn't do what they did. They did what they did. So I thought that was worth passing on. Whatever your faith might be, I thought that was still kind of worth passing on, because I know that these situations can cause a lot of anger, and a lot of people can get to that place where if they ever did believe to begin with, they really become very angry and hostile and kind of renounce faith in God. But I think then that's a whole different discussion for a whole another day. But, God is not the author of confusion. And what you experienced was a whole lot of confusion. So I think depending on what you believe, God's not the one to get upset with. It's, the guy from downstairs. So just some thoughts. Jennifer says, yeah, the Bible can be perceived in so many different ways. Yep. Yeah, I agree. And Jennifer's saying that she's agnostic, and I would say I'm agnostic too. Agnostic with a twist of Buddhist is how I would describe myself. But your faith is your faith, and speaking of triggers and stuff, when I was a kid, we used to go to church almost every single Sunday, and I found myself getting so angry whenever we would go into church, and I did not know why for decades. I didn't know why until probably last year. And I think there was many different reasons for that. But I think one of the reasons was because I was so angry at my grandfather that I didn't want to have anything to do with God. And going in the church and singing, and everybody else seemed so happy. And I had so much anger in me, even as a child, over what he was and how he treated other people. And I could see it at such a young age. All I knew was, even then as a kid, I remember feeling like my level of anger when we went to church was weird. Like, I didn't know why I was so angry. I didn't want to shake hands with anybody. I didn't want to hold people's hands when we sang songs. I didn't want to smile. I didn't want to be there. Like, I just knew I felt really strongly about things, but I didn't know why. And it took me 39 years to figure out why. So it's just interesting when you start connecting the dots to all this stuff, Okay. So, yeah, Bonnie says, I will not follow confusion. I'm getting clearer every day. Yeah, move in the direction of what is nourishing, what brings peace into your life, what, like, you just know, that you're on the right track, and it's a healthy track, and it's healthy for you. It's healthy for other people around you. You're just kind of in that zone, like let that be your North Star. And then I think if you can get used to feeling good, then when you feel bad, and when you're off track, and you can tell when things are get so twisted and manipulated, that no matter who's telling you, if it's a therapist or a preacher or your mother, or you know what I mean, or your neighbor, whoever, that you're not getting knocked off course, because you know what your North Star is, and what's healthy for you and what's nourishing for you. And you don't lose sight of that. Okay, so let's take a moment and just kind of get grounded. And we're going to be way over tonight, so I apologize. But taking some time, I feel so good. Take some time to just get settled in, to get grounded. Being present in the moment. Taking several deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Turning your attention inward until you can feel your heartbeat. Now bringing your attention to the top of your head, slowly making your way down your face, paying attention to any areas that you're storing any pain, stress, or tension. Relaxing your eyes, your cheeks, your mouth. Releasing your tongue from the roof of your mouth and letting your jaw fall open. Relaxing your shoulders, your upper back. Allowing your chest to open up. Remembering to continue to breathe. Bringing your attention down into your chest, your stomach. Noticing if you're holding any stress or tension in your stomach, as if you're clenching your muscles and letting them relax. Letting your hips relax, your lower back. Allowing your legs to fall open to whatever position might be most comfortable for you. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, your calves, your feet. Bringing your attention back up to your arms. Letting your arms fall into whatever position is most comfortable. Feeling the weight of them as they settle by your side. Relaxing your arms, your forearms, and your hands. Unclenching your fists if you are noticing that you have your hands clenched. Relaxing your fingers. Feeling the heaviness of your body. And let's do something a little different tonight. Let's try one of those. Actually, let's try a few of those different visualization exercises that I was talking about earlier. So visualize a doorway in front of you. The doorway can look any way that you want it to look. It can be a plain wooden doorway, like one that you have in your home, or it can be a very ornate doorway, like something from a magnificent castle. Think of your doorway now. Now imagine that there is this cascade of silver light, easily and effortlessly and endlessly flowing over just on the other side of that doorway. You can't quite tell if it's light or if it's water, but it just looks absolutely amazing, whatever it is. As you walk closer to it, you decide to walk underneath it. somehow you get the realization that as you walk underneath this waterfall, that it's just going to cleanse away all of the negativity, the stress, the tension, the pain, anything unwanted that you've been hanging on to emotionally. It's going to instantly, effortlessly, and completely just wash off your body. So when you're ready, start moving your way through that amazing waterfall. Noticing as all of that negativity, stress, pain, anxiety, unpleasantness starts washing away from you. It's as if you were covered in mud and you didn't even know it. And as you continue making your way through that waterfall, coming out on the other side, feeling squeaky clean, and you notice that so much, if not all, of that anxiety, that pain, that negativity is just gone. That you feel refreshed, rejuvenated, just completely cleansed. And it's just such an amazing feeling. It's a feeling that you haven't had in years. Now visualize creating a giant bubble around you. You can make it as big or as small as you would like. And perhaps you would like that bubble to be in the same color as the waterfall. Realizing that this is your safe space, and that as you go out into the world, that you can be in your little bubble, and whatever issues, negativity, and garbage that might come up in the world, that you don't have to let that impact your space. That you have this sense of peace, that you have this space, that you control what energy comes into your space. Taking the time right now to feel comfortable in this bubble, realizing that you are in control and enjoying it. And perhaps in this bubble, the inside of it can look any way that you want it to look. You might have a chair in there. You might have a bed in there. You might have a chair and a bed in there. You might have books in there. It might, whatever is warm and welcoming and inviting, it might be completely empty in there. There is no wrong way to do this. It's your space. It's your energy and it surrounds you. And as you go out into the world, and if you encounter any of that anxiety and that pressure, knowing that you can always close your eyes and find your little bubble again, get back in it. You don't have to let anybody else in if you don't want to. You're in control. Okay, and so now let's take a few moments and still kind of holding on to that feeling of everything good and right in the world and within yourself. Kind of picturing that silver white light deep within inside of you and letting that light expand out throughout your body, up to the tip top of your head, down your arms, down your body, to your stomach, your lower back, your hips, your legs, down to your feet, bringing that healing light, realizing that now that this light is inside of you, that all of that amazing healing, restorative energy that you once felt on the outside of you, that you're now feeling on the inside of you. that it's regenerating and repairing, sending light and love to every single cell in your body. As that light swirls and just moves so effortlessly and joyfully and playfully all throughout your body, cleansing and repairing and restoring every single cell. Now let's take some time to send some of that light and love that you're feeling within yourself kind of out into the world, maybe to other people in this chat, or to people that you care about, or people that you know that just use some light and love sent their way. Take some time to go send them a big energetic hug, letting them know how much they mean to you, and maybe telling them a few reasons as to why they mean so much to you as you give them that energetic hug. So let's do this for the next 7 breaths. And when you're ready, come on back to yourself. Make sure that you give yourself a really big energetic hug, acknowledging some of the many things that are right about you, letting yourself know that you matter, that you are worthy of dignity and respect, and that there is so, so much right with you. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Doug. Hi, Doug. Thank you for the live stream donation. He says, I hope all is well with you, Dana. Thank you for all you do. Oh, you are so welcome. He says, sending light and love to all. I hope you all find the healing I have thanks to Dana. Oh, well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. And I'm just so glad, so humbled and honored to be able to be a part of all of this. It's just the coolest thing to see people waking up to their authentic self and reconnecting. It's so cool to see people just come alive. So you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. hopefully I will see you next Tuesday. Angie and I are going to be doing the live stream. We'll be going live from my channel next Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go for about an hour. If you can't make it, then I'll see you Wednesday. So 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we normally go for 3 hours if I remember to set the timer. So we'll see. Oh, thank you. Missouri Cowboy says, thank you, Dana. Baby steps do add up. Balance the destination. Good deal. And thank you for the donation. I appreciate it. You guys have a fantastic week. I will talk to you soon. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. I'll talk to you soon. Good night.